Immortal Cultivation in the Cybernetic Milky Way. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyright or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 426. Roses are always roses. Go ahead, the Immortal Lord is waiting for you. The former General Ling Yu stepped aside and opened the door to the last room. But he then said to Mo and Fanny, the Immortal Lord is only willing to see the mistress and the young master. Please wait patiently here. Fanny stood there in boredom. She was very well behaved. Madame Rose thought about it, and suddenly said to the former general, if you have nothing to do, you can practice with this little girl. She is also a member of the Immortal Lord's tribe, so she is considered one of our own. The former general nodded and said, yes. Fanny opened her eyes wide in surprise, and then became excited. It is so rare to have such an opportunity to fight with a union cultivator. Madame Rose originally wanted to make Fanny suffer, but seeing that this girl actually looked very happy, she smiled and still thought that this little girl was very cute. Nanling had already walked into the last room. The powerful and condensed virtual torrent instantly washed over him, making his whole body illuminated with a brilliant light and shadow. At the same time, the Thunder Wing Jin blade was suspended behind him, exerting a powerful magnetic field for him, empowering the terrifying virtual torrent and protecting itself. He looked behind him with some worry. He was very worried that Madame Rose would not be able to deal with such a high intensity of virtuality. However, he soon realized that he was completely overthinking, because Madame Rose did not enter with her real body at this time, but drilled in with her newly acquired nascent soul. The nascent soul was unharmed by the flushing of the virtuality. Don't worry, my son, I am the inventor of the virtuality. I know too well what its mechanism of action is. Nanling looked at the little man who jumped onto his shoulder, and suddenly wondered if his mother was just holding on. Forget it, he already knew his mother's upright attributes very well. He maintained the strong magnetic field to isolate the virtuality without saying a word, and then walked into the middle of the hall step by step. Here, there was a huge triangular prism standing. The triangular prism was extremely dark, but it emitted infinite power that interfered with the surrounding quadrants. Lady Rose's nascent soul whispered in Nanling's ear. Be careful, don't get close to the 5-meter range of this engine. That is the direct radiation range of the virtual engine. No matter how strong your magnetic field is, it can't stop it. Nanling nodded carefully, and then slowly rotated around this virtual engine with the power of annihilation. When he had just walked through a third of a circle, he heard a voice from the virtual engine. Rose, you are finally here. As the voice fell, a figure suddenly emerged in the darkness on one side of the dark triangular prism of the virtual engine. Nanling looked over and found a handsome man in a plain robe floating there. Lady Rose was stunned when she saw this. She hesitated for a moment, and finally asked with concern, why did you lock yourself in the virtual engine? That was Gyujonigu, also known as Gyuja engine. He smiled calmly and said, because after you left, the virtual engine started to lose control, and I could only control it with my own strength. Madame Rose was stunned. She said, but my nascent soul stayed with you. If you have any problems, just let it help you. He said, you also said that it was just it. What I need is you. Nanling felt a chill after hearing this. This ancient immortal king gave him the feeling of a scumbag. Madame Rose was very fond of this. Her expression relaxed at once, but then she said helplessly, why are you doing this? The nascent soul is also mine, not to mention that everyone on this ship is innocent. Ancient immortal king sighed and said, this is why I prefer this. The virtual engine leaked not long after you left. I thought I could fix it, but I didn't expect the engine to leak more and more. Later, I could only use my own body to plug the hole. After all, I wanted to use the virtual to free my will from the cage of my body. Madame Rose heard this and understood it after just a little thought. She said, my nascent soul doesn't need you to protect it. It originally exists in the form of a wave, and even if it is virtualized, it will not have much impact. Gyujin shook his head and said, no, the nascent soul cannot exist in the form of a wave. It must maintain the wave particle duality to be able to affect the real material existence and remain in this world. Otherwise it is just a simple wave state, and it will not be able to continue to remain in your body. Nanling's eyes suddenly lit up. This is the content of the nascent soul stage, and it is also the experience of a truly ancient cultivator like Gyujin on the nascent soul. Madame Rose did not say anything, because she did not think it was a big deal. But the ancient immortal lord noticed the change in Nanling's expression, and said unexpectedly, You can actually understand it. Nanling nodded repeatedly, and he said, I roughly understand. Lord Immortal Lord means that only by ensuring the wave particle duality of the nascent soul can there be hope of further progress. Oh, is the quantum state of this wave particle duality actually the top priority of nascent soul practice? The ancient Immortal Lord was even more surprised. He said, I didn't expect you to have such an understanding. It's a pity that this immortal boat is destined to sink with me, and I can't leave you much. Madame Rose immediately said, he doesn't need your things. He is my son, not your son. The ancient Immortal Lord chuckled and said, your son is my son, what's the difference? Besides, he is indeed a child with our common blood flowing in his veins. At this point, Madame Rose's face suddenly changed. She seemed to have touched some reverse scale and said, of course, but don't forget that 1/3 of his blood in his body comes from that Feng Xianji. You will never forget Feng Xianji, why bother to provoke me again? Xianjun still had a smile on his face, and he sighed leisurely. Rose, I can't forget you. Madame Rose continued to be angry, but then she suddenly realized something and was stunned. She said, I'm talking about Feng Xianji. Xianjun still smiled and said, I'm talking about you, Rose. Maybe you don't remember, Rose has always been my nickname for you for a long time. Then you left, and then came back. But Rose is still the same Rose. Madame Rose was stunned, and there seemed to be endless information in her eyes. She held her forehead in a daze and pain, and then said, my lost memories are with you. Xianjun said, you have always left your memories in the fairy palace, and your former mates have been waiting there for you to go back and get everything back. I have advised you many times before, wanting you to go to the fairy palace to take a look, but I don't know why you just don't want to. Nanling understood, it was indeed his mother's temper to do this. Chapter 427. The end of the immortal boat. Madame Rose ran out in a daze. She was going to pursue her more ancient memories. Ancient Immortal Lord watched this scene with a smile, expecting and waiting. Then he looked at Nanling and said, child, we still have some time before your mother comes back. Ask any questions you have. Nanling looked at him, with thousands of questions in his mind, which finally converged into one question. How about we talk about nascent soul? Ancient Immortal Lord was stunned. Even he, who was knowledgeable, could not understand Nanling's train of thought. He asked, aren't you interested in your mother's past? I thought you would ask questions about that. Nanling shook her head and said, I'm not interested in your mother's and your past. Even if there is, my mother will tell me if she can. I'm only interested in your understanding of the way of the nascent soul now. After all, you will leave when my mother comes back, right? Xianjun nodded silently, and then said helplessly, I don't know whether to say that you're dedicated to the Tower cold and ruthless, but you were right, leaving my inheritance to you during this period is the most important thing. Nanling's eyes lit up immediately after hearing this, revealing an expectant look. Xianjun's expression became cold, and he began to tell his way of cultivation from the beginning. Obviously, he didn't have a good impression of Nanling now. However, not long after, he found that Nanling was scratching his head and seemed to be hesitant to speak. Ancient Immortal Lord paused and said coldly, isn't this exactly the experience you need? Why don't you concentrate on listening? Nanling was a little embarrassed when he heard it, and said, well, time is limited. Can you start directly from the nascent soul? Ancient Immortal Lord's face became even colder. He had never met such a person. He was so picky when passing on his experience to him. He said, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. The way I pass on must start from the foundation building, otherwise how can you fully understand the mystery of breaking through the nascent soul? Nanling was a little embarrassed to hear it and said, but I am very confident in my own golden elixir, and I don't think that breaking through the nascent soul will be difficult for me. I'm just worried about the cultivation after the nascent soul, so I want to ask the Immortal Lord for advice and have a reference. Ancient Immortal Lord was even more disdainful when he heard it. He said, no, if you want my inheritance, I will give it to you, but you can only listen from the beginning. Seeing this, Nanling could only sigh helplessly and said, okay, you have the final say. Then he quickly adjusted his mentality and began to listen carefully to Ancient Immortal Lord's foundation building and golden elixir. First of all, starting from the foundation building, Nanling found that Xianjun's foundation building was indeed unique, but this was just a slight adjustment on the foundation building spirit formation, which was almost the same as the spirit formation used by Fan. It was obvious that it was a special spirit formation provided by Fanny, and Fanny had already shared this kind of confidential matter with him, and he even modified a version for his own use. Originally, Nanling was worried that those old guys in Fanny's family would come to trouble him, but now, he at least has a legal source. Then there is the way of golden elixir, which is similar to what he and Gye Chen discussed at this stage. However, there are indeed some bright ideas in some aspects, such as the method of superimposing spirit formations, which can instantly burst out combat power far beyond the current level. There is also a method of strengthening combat skills, which is actually the use of different polarities of the feather spear and sword, and combined with the spirit formation that solidifies the corresponding concepts, it can exert a stronger power. In general, there are quite a few such applications involving actual combat power improvement, and many of Nanling's eyes lit up when he heard them. At the end of his speech, the Immortal Lord Gye said in closing, "If you can integrate all of this, then achieving the nascent soul state will be a natural thing. Now you understand why I didn't tell you about the nascent soul directly. After all, if I talk to you about the nascent soul directly without these, it will only harm you." Nanling heard this and asked, "Then Immortal Lord, can you tell me about the nascent soul state now?" The Immortal Lord Gye shook his head and said, "No, it's too early for you to talk about this now. I will leave all my inheritance with your mother. When you reach the realm, you can naturally get everything you want from your mother. What's more, you originally took the wind attribute route. If you continue to practice, it will be more effective to ask your mother." At this moment, Madame Rose appeared in the hall with a kind of cold melancholy. Nanling was stunned for a moment and found that his mother's temperament had changed again. Madame Rose looked at Nanling and nodded, then said, "I saw Xiao. She was very old and tired. After seeing me, she left before she could say anything." Gye Chen immediately stopped talking nonsense with Nanling, turned his head and looked at Madame Rose, who had now evolved into Fen Xianji, and said, "Yes, she has been waiting for you for a long time." Madame Rose, "No, now it's Fen Rousey," she said. "I am sorry for her, but unfortunately I can't make it up to her anymore." Then she turned her head and looked at Gye Chen and said, "Junyu, it's been so many years since we last met. Are you okay?" Gye Chen didn't say much. Fen Rousey then sighed and said, "Yes, you are not doing well, and I am not doing well either. When you leave, I will still be my Madame Rose. After 3 lives, I am no longer the Fen Rousey who only practices cultivation." Nanling was very surprised when he heard this. It turned out that his biological mother had really experienced reincarnation and cultivation. Gye Chen smiled and said, "No, you are still you. I'm glad that you came back before I left. At least this way, I can start the next journey with full motivation." Fen Rousey looked at Gye Chen with complicated eyes, and finally sighed and nodded, "Well, goodbye." Gye Chen said, "Now, take this child away from here. There is no way to shut down the virtual engine naturally. I can only detonate it from the inside. You guys leave quickly." Fen Rousey nodded again, and a hint of complexity flashed across her eyes. But just as she said, she is no longer the original her, and her feelings for Gye Chen are no longer that deep. She looked at Nanling again and said, "Let's go." Nanling nodded, not surprised at the changes in his own mother. After all, his mother has lost too many memories, and she will change every time she finds a little bit. He should have gotten used to it. When he came to the outer room, he happened to meet Fanny and Mo, who were sweating profusely and were weak all over from military training. After the 4 of them reunited, they hurriedly said a few words and said goodbye to the former General Ling Yu, and then flew out quickly. The Juxia started immediately, and after flying for a while, the huge Antarctic Changsheng suddenly burst into a terrifying black light, and then collapsed inward as if it was swallowed by something, and disappeared directly from this world. The Antarctic Changsheng, which was once like a miracle, the arrogant Gye Chen, and the people on this ship, in the end, we are still the only survivors of this ship. Nanling sighed as he looked at his mother who had become noble and cold. However, the next moment Fen Rousey cracked, and the laziness and elegance of Lady Rose returned to her. She said, "Yes, my poor little baby, you didn't even inherit a little bit of inheritance. This bad feeling is really familiar." Nanling was relieved about this and felt that it was better this way. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 428. The body is still cold. On the Judoxia, Fanny was full of curiosity about the appearance of the Immortal Lord. After all, the ancient immortal lord could be said to be the ancestor of her branch of the Gi family. She couldn't wait to chatter in the small group as soon as she got on the spaceship. Nanling turned the picture of the ancient immortal lord that she saw into a photo and put it in their small group to satisfy Fanny's curiosity. After all, this was her ancestor, so it wouldn't be a problem for her to look up to him, right? At this time, Madame Rose said to Nanling, "How was your chat with him when I was away just now?" Nanling shook his head and said, "Not very good. I asked him about the nascent soul realm, and he told me everything from Foundation establishment to Golden Core. You didn't tell me what the nascent soul was like until you came back. I doubt that Lord Immortal himself doesn't know what the nascent soul feels like." Madame Rose smiled and said, How can you be so vicious? He's your father after all." Nanling hurriedly shook his head and said, "No, I have a mother, and if you really have to count offspring, the other people in the Lingyu Guard also have his genes." Madame Rose said, "So you are different. You are his recognized offspring, unlike others. Besides, you are the only one left now." Nanling shook his head and was speechless. Seeing him like this, Madame Rose changed the subject and said, "Well, what you said is actually quite right. That guy has been trapped in his own body for thousands of years. Do you think he can give you any good advice on the nascent soul? It's not that he doesn't want to say it, but he can't say it for the sake of face. What a poisonous mouth. Is he still dead?" Nanling was in a much better mood. The ancient immortal did not give Nanling any good advice. He thought it was a big deal to recognize him as his heir. Little did he know that for Nanling, he was only willing to recognize him for the sake of his mother. However, what they didn't know was that the ancient immortal detonated the virtual engine, causing the entire Antarctic Changshan to enter a vague journey. But he himself remained in this world. Because his own will was so strong that he would not disappear for a while because of the disappearance of his body. Instead, he became a wave that was everywhere, and could appear in any corner of the universe with a thought. He still couldn't let go of his beloved woman and his adopted child, so he came to the Juxia quietly and silently, wanting to take another look at them. However, what made him speechless was that he heard the mother and daughter complaining about him as soon as he appeared. He was still dead. He was very angry, especially towards Nanling, his adopted son. He felt that this child didn't know anything and was just talking nonsense here, which was simply unreasonable. But at this moment, he heard Madame Rose saying, "Don't worry, I'll tell you whatever you want to know. Fenrouzi is Mother's previous life. Mother knows everything about Gijianlu and Fenrouzi." Gijianjin's consciousness suddenly became very discouraged, and he found that he couldn't get angry at all. At this time Nanling said, "Mom, I just want to know what your nascent soul stage is like." Madame Rose also asked unexpectedly, "Why do you want to explore the nascent soul stage so early? This will have an impact on your Golden Core stage practice, right?" Nanling shook his head and said, "To be honest with you, Mom, I have my own understanding of the practice of the Golden Core stage. I already know the conventional practice routines of this era, but I think they are all superficial things, and I am exploring the essence of the Golden Core. But this essence is not easy to find, so I want to see more about what the nascent soul is like, so that I can conduct further research and figure out what my Golden Core should be like." Madame Rose was at a loss. Golden Core is Golden Core, what else can it be cultivated into? What she and Nanling didn't know was that at this time, Gijianjin was floating beside Madame Rose, nodding seriously, indicating that his wife had said everything he wanted to say. At this time, Nanling's expression suddenly became haggard, and the whole person instantly became thin and weak as if he had been squeezed dry. Just as Madame Rose was surprised and worried, Nanling opened his mouth and spit out his golden elixir. His golden elixir was exposed to the air, and immediately there was a dense aura surrounding it, making this golden elixir look like a world-famous elixir. Mrs. Rose said anxiously, "Child, how could you spit out the golden elixir so casually?" Nanling waved her hand and said, "It's okay, Mom. My golden elixir is very strong. It doesn't matter if you use it to crack walnuts. This is my golden elixir. It is made with the essence of the human body, and then calcined with the essence and fire of the Dardan. Look, can you vaguely see something gestating inside this golden elixir?" Mrs. Rose said, "Isn't what is gestating inside it the nascent soul? If you have gestated the nascent soul, you will have cultivated it." Nanling nodded and said, "Of course I know this, but I want to understand more about the gestation process, and I want to be able to control this process independently." Mrs. Rose was stunned. She really couldn't understand Nanling's idea. Nanling said seriously, because I think that if I can't figure out the process of the nascent soul when I am forming the pill, then how can I understand the essence of the nascent soul in the nascent soul stage? If I can't figure out the essence of the nascent soul, how can I move on to the next realm? Madame Rose was very impressed. She said, I didn't expect you to have such a great ambition, but I am curious, since you have your own ideas, then what is the path that the rest of us have been practicing for you? Nanling smiled lightly, and then 13 spirit formations appeared around the golden pill. Among these 13 spirit formations, there are 4 solid wind spirit formations and 1 solid thunder spirit formation. The remaining 6 wind spirit formations and 2 spirit formations, 1 fire and 1 water, are still in the virtual state. Nanling said, the path that I have been practicing is like this for me, an external thing that can be achieved and changed at any time. After the voice fell, he gently tapped the virtual fire spirit formation. The next moment, the fire wing flying sword popped out from beside him, and then injected pure fire spirit power, causing the fire spirit formation to be quickly refined and then solidified. As Nanling injected a true concept of purification into it, the fire spirit formation was completely solidified. He said frankly, so, according to the standards of this era, I'm a cultivator of the 6th level of the golden core. But in my opinion, this is of no benefit to my cultivation at all. At best, it just adds some insignificant pressure to my golden core. Madame Rose opened her mouth. She suddenly felt that the nascent soul she had just picked up might be a fake. Why not throw it away? The ancient immortal lord, who existed in the form of a wave, was also stunned. He looked at Nanling and felt that he was looking at a monster. Chapter 429 Infinite Reincarnation. Nanling's understanding of that golden elixir is far beyond this era, because he has the thinking of his previous life and knows how to pursue the essence. People in this era have been following the path of using skills to wend to the Tao, and they really can't turn that corner. But for those who really understand, how can they not distinguish the good from the bad when a correct path is in front of them? After Mrs. Rose understood what Nanling was studying, she immediately recognized the correctness of Nanling's approach. The same is true for the ancient immortal monarch in the wave state. In fact, he can understand it better in his current state. Mrs. Rose suddenly spit out her nascent soul. Looking at her small nascent soul, her eyes gradually became disgusted. She said, what you said made me want to reincarnate again. Nanling asked in surprise, Mom, how did you manage to reincarnate before? Madame Rose said, at first I just used clones to try it, but later I found that clones can also copy the number of times human cells divide. That is to say, if a person is cloned after the cells in the body have divided 30 times, then the body cells of the clone will only have a maximum of 20 division opportunities. This is a temporary solution, not a permanent solution. Later I tried to see if I could keep my consciousness in the body of the newborn and grow together. But I soon found that it was too cruel for the child. I had to take away her body and erase all her consciousness before I could occupy this body. I didn't succeed in that attempt, but instead I grew up with the child. Nanling saw Madame Rose's nostalgia for the child and guessed, is her name Xiaohua? Madame Rose came to her senses and nodded, saying, yes, after I left, she stayed in the fairy palace waiting for me to return. Nanling sighed and said, so what happened next? Madame Rose said, then I thought of the way humans give birth to new life. I planned to use my own womb to give birth to a god who completely inherited my genes from the embryo. When the birth is complete, all the power of the mother body will be infused into this new life. This is the method I thought of to break through the life limit of the nascent soul. It was also from then on that I was called the Immortal together with Gijianyu. Nanling felt like his eyes were opened after hearing this. Immortal, Gijianju's immortality is to refine everything about himself into his body, forming an immortal body. Madame Rose's immortality is to constantly give birth to herself in this way, so that her body is constantly in a state of refreshing. Nanling pondered for a while and felt something was wrong. He said, but, there must be flaws in this kind of thing, right? Madame Rose nodded and said, yes, I lost a lot of memories when I reincarnated for the first time. Later, Gijianyu accompanied me and patiently found them back bit by bit. Then I had an idea. I would back up some of my memories before reincarnation, and then find them back after reincarnation. Nanling asked in confusion, it sounds like you have reincarnated many times like this. Madame Rose nodded, reincarnation is a fascinating experience for me. Because every time I reincarnate, I will forget my identity at the beginning, and I will experience my childhood again as a brand new individual and grow up little by little. It's just that I will gradually remember something in the process of growing up, and then I will always return to the ferry boat to find all my memories. You know, the feeling of starting over again. Nanling probably understood the crux of her mother's problem after hearing this. Perhaps for her, the nascent soul stage without any room for advancement is like a dead end. It seems meaningless to continue to suffer in it, so she just played a unique life game like this. So it is estimated that Gijianjun has experienced the plot of Lady Rose coming to the Antarctic Changshan to recover her memory many times, but he still enjoys playing with her like this. Wait, Nanling felt that he seemed to have discovered something. He felt that the reason why Gijianjun still loved his mother so much was that Lady Rose could always bring him enough freshness. A wife who changes her skin from time to time, this feeling is amazing for a man. Perhaps his mind is too active, so that his brain waves diverge a little, which makes Spot-Eye Gijianjun also receive his brain waves. Then Gijianjun was silent. How could he refute such a thing? Anyway, it's useless to refute. Madame Rose continued, at first I thought that as long as I managed my memory, everything would be fine. But I didn't expect that with my reincarnations, many feelings would be different. I feel that I am no longer the same person I used to be. Every time Fenrouzi is reborn, she is a different Fenrouzi. So which one is the real Fenrouzi? Originally, I used the guy Gijani who was an anchor. To me in his memory is a mirror of me. But that bastard, the image of me in his memory changes every time I reincarnate, making me gradually lose myself. Until one time, Fenrouzi simply sealed and cut all her memories, and then reincarnated into a brand new person. That is my predecessor, the stupid woman who helped Gijani make the virtual engine. Because Fenrouzi's cognitive impairment was also passed on to her, this reincarnation was very resistant to the fairy palace where Fenrouzi's memories were stored, which eventually caused Fenxianji to disappear on the Antarctic Changshan for decades. You know what happened next. Nanling was speechless for a long time after listening to this. The only feeling in his heart was, Mom, you are really playing tricks. Although they were obviously talking about cultivation, the topic somehow turned to this direction, but Nanling was really excited to listen to it. He asked, Then Mom, do you have any problems with your understanding of yourself now? Madame Rose shook her head and said, No, I'm just Rose, your mother now. After so many times, I have completely figured it out. Every life is a brand new beginning for me. I must take every life seriously, instead of ending it casually and starting over like before. Madame Rose said, she remembered something and said, By the way, speaking of this, I have to say that maybe it is because I have reincarnated many times that only a part of my consciousness is condensed in the nascent soul, which allows it to exist for so long without my body. But it is also because of this that I found that the nascent soul is actually very similar to the projection of consciousness. I hope this can help you. Nanling squinted his eyes and nodded repeatedly after listening. He said, Is that so? That's a bit interesting. It is indeed helpful to me. Chapter 430. The possibility of reincarnation. Nanling exchanged experiences with Madame Rose, and the more they talked, the more upset Madame Rose felt. She wanted to reincarnate and start a new life. Fortunately, Nanling quickly pulled her back and said, No need, Mom. I think your nascent soul is actually quite good. Madame Rose asked in surprise, Why? Nanling said, You have been reincarnated so many times. Do you feel that the cultivation of foundation building and golden elixir is getting easier and faster? Madame Rose said, Of course. After all, the first time is unfamiliar. I have practiced it so many times. Nanling said, Then in this process, Mom's adjustment of her own essence, energy and spirit has been adjusted imperceptibly. Although you don't know the exact reason, after practicing like this again and again, the golden elixir has naturally reached a relatively perfect state. Nanling was surprised and excited as he spoke. He said, Mom, I think your method of continuous reincarnation and cultivation may actually be more in line with the cultivation method of the ancients who invented the way of cultivation in ancient times. Otherwise, it is hard to say how they could establish such a mysterious system framework. Madame Rose said in surprise, How did the ancients achieve continuous reincarnation without such advanced technology? Nanling said, The ancients believed that people have souls. In fact, this is the consciousness wave we have discovered now. They believe that after a person dies, the soul, that is, the consciousness wave, will still remain in this world for a period of time. Bowtie Ancient Immortal Lord was stunned for a moment. He suddenly realized that this state was very similar to his current state. He couldn't help but listen to it, and at the same time he was curious about where Nanling got this ancient knowledge. Madame Rose was worthy at being his former wife. She thought of the same thing at once. She asked, "Where did you find all this knowledge?" Nanling was not panicked at all after hearing this. He was prepared for this. In other words, since he regained consciousness in this world, he has been looking for the connection between this era and the era he lived in his previous life. Therefore, many records of ancient deeds that exist in the corners of the internet have been collected by him. It's a pity that the mother planet experienced a disaster that no one expected, which caused human civilization to lose most of its history on the mother planet, otherwise this kind of thing would be easier. Nanling projected rows of text in front of him and said, "That's it." Madame Rose asked in surprise, "What are these?" Nanling said, "These are the basis of my theory. Some of them are story collections recorded by some family descendants for deceased elders. There are many descriptions of the ancient mother planet in them. Others are reference documents I found after joining the Give family's academy on Give Star. They are all myths and legends about early humans. There are many records about souls and ghosts in them." Madame Rose asked in surprise, "How did you think of discovering the secrets of cultivation from these mysterious records? No normal person would do such a thing." Nanling smiled and said, "I'm just curious, what would it be like if these ancient legends could be explained by our scientific theories? As you know, consciousness wave is the soul, and immortals, I guess, maybe they are the kind of transcendents who can exist in wave or particle state at will. Legend has it that they can be everywhere, which may refer to wave state. There are also legends that they can move mountains and seas, which we can do with technology, but wouldn't it be an interference with reality to explain it with the way of cultivation? This may be the power of particle state." As he spoke, he suddenly opened his eyes wide and said to Mrs. Rose, "Mom, I think the virtual engine you designed actually has great potential. If we can find that technology to reverse the wave state matter, then, void creation, creation out of nothing, Genesis." Countless such terms appeared in Nanling's mind at once. He suddenly realized that the virtual engine invented by his mother by accident might be the real key. Of course, these ideas are just some fragments and have not been systematized, but they're already some good inspirations for Nanling. Mrs. Rose didn't care about those things. She brought the topic back to the previous one. "But you haven't told me how the ancients completed reincarnation." Nanling said, "It's very simple. At the beginning of a life's birth, the consciousness wave is attached to it. The baby in the womb has no consciousness at all, and of course there will be no resistance. And the consciousness wave attached to it can also completely merge with the baby as it grows. But I suspect that this process will inevitably consume the consciousness wave itself. After all, the consciousness wave of cultivators is more powerful, and if newborns want to be able to withstand these consciousness waves, they will inevitably have to strengthen their brains and bodies in a stress-like manner. I speculate that this process will greatly consume the consciousness wave, and in many cases even the previous memories and experiences of the consciousness wave will be erased. But such a body also completely belongs to the former cultivator, and the individual adjusted in this way should also be extremely outstanding." Mrs. Rose thought about it and felt that this logic was self-consistent. She looked at Nanling helplessly and said, "You have also integrated the experience of losing my memory when I reincarnated, right?" Nanling smiled embarrassedly and nodded, saying, "Practice what you have learned. It's just a theoretical conjecture anyway, so there's no harm in trying it." The mother and son put aside the topic, and simply made an appointment with Fanny and Mo to have a good chat about cultivation. Now everyone around Nanling has been led to like this way of discussing their own experiences from time to time. Because they all realize that the road of cultivation is far from the end, instead of cherishing their own things, it is better for everyone to communicate more, and maybe they can create a new era of cultivation. The mother and son left with laughter, but the wavering ancient immortal groaned on the spot. It must be said that he felt that Nanling's words made a lot of sense. At the same time, his heart immediately became red, and Nanling's speculation about the reincarnation and recultivation of ancient humans deeply touched him. He suddenly floated up, and then disappeared in a flash. Zhuoxia stayed there for quite a while, because they had a very detailed discussion, helping Madame Rose to understand the cause and effect of the golden core and the nascent soul, and also letting others have a more intuitive and detailed understanding of that practice of the nascent soul realm. After all, she was once Feng Xianji. Although she was only a more powerful nascent soul in terms of strength, she really broke through the limit of lifespan. And now it seems that this reincarnation method will not lose her creativity. Nanling found it hard to imagine. She didn't expect that her own mother was the one who ended the furthest in the practice of the world without knowing it. Just as they were discussing fiercely, Fanny suddenly screamed, "Ah!" Everyone looked over curiously and asked, "What's wrong?" Fanny said, "My father told me that Mother Bye is pregnant again." Everyone congratulated her. But Fanny herself didn't seem to be so happy. After all, her father had already begun to ignore her when she was the second child. Now it's the third child, so he must ignore her even more. Chapter 431 Edge Galaxy. The story of the Antarctic eternal life has come to an end. With the disappearance of the immortal boat and the virtual engine, this virtual space will soon recover. After a short gathering with Nan Lin, Mrs. Rose said goodbye decisively and left. She is a person who can't sit still. Although she longs for family affection, she doesn't want to be tied down by family affection. Perhaps an organization like the Dieting Organization, which can constantly inquire about the secrets and interesting stories of the world, is her true home. Just like now, she said with great interest, "I'm going to UU. I have always been very curious about what happened there." Nanling said reluctantly, "But if we go to UU, it will take at least 20 years to get there, right?" Mrs. Rose shook her head and said, "Don't forget that I was once a great scientist of the Antarctic eternal life. The most advanced hyperspace engine only takes 7 or 8 years to get there." Sure enough, the technology of deep hyperspace navigation has never been a secret to such top-level figures. "You don't have to worry about my safety. After all, you have demonstrated how to deal with those AI enemies. I can intercept some information from the deep hyperspace. I believe that kind of information will be more troublesome for AIS." Nanling said with emotion. "Okay, but in this way, we don't know when we can meet again." Madame Rose smiled at him playfully and said, "We're just separated by a river. Why are you so sentimental?" As soon as the voice fell, she disappeared from the Zhuoxia in a very chic way. The defensive facilities of the Zhuoxia seemed to be non-existent to her. She came and went as she pleased. It seems that these technological creations are indeed useful for high-level monks, but their use is still limited. Madame Rose also has a ship next to her, and this ship directly entered the hyperspace voyage a moment later. It seems that she has just said goodbye to Nanling. The words left before leaving are also very interesting. Separated by a river. That means the entire Milky Way. Fanny dared to complain. She was so well behaved when Lady Rose was around. Indeed, the mother and son will have to look at each other from afar on the other side of the Milky Way. Nanling shook his head and said, "She hopes that we can find a way to shorten the distance between the galaxies, such as the wormhole we are studying. In theory, a wormhole can definitely lead to another exit, but we don't know how to unlock the shackles of the Milky Way in space." Fanny said, "What's there to think about? Let's find a wormhole and try it again. I already have many good ideas." Nanling was upset about this. He was really worried that Fanny's methods would go wrong. After all, the previous wormhole was so cooperative, but it didn't mean that the next wormhole would be so cooperative. He immediately suggested, "Don't forget that we have a commission from the Seeker of Knowledge. Let's first find out the traces of the dark locusts on the edge of the wind domain." Fanny also remembered her little pet that she had raised for a while, so she nodded and said, "Okay, let's go find that dark locusts first." So the Zhuoxia started again and headed for the Edge star system. The Edge star systems were actually some planetary systems that were not under the control of the wind domain and had a certain degree of autonomy, just like the vassal states in ancient times. To be honest, for these vassal states, the intelligent machine crisis that swept the entire galaxy was more like a carnival for them. Because their suzerain states had no time to pay attention to them, naturally they could completely let themselves go in many cases. They have a characteristic, that is, due to the limitations of economy and national strength, they cannot achieve a high degree of intelligence. Even their fleets are mostly old-fashioned fleets operated by humans, which makes it difficult for the intelligent machine crisis to spread to such corners. When the Zhuoxia, disguised as the Autumn Water class, came to this marginal star field, it actually seemed quite sociable. Even the Kyoshua class is a handsome guy here. There is not even a network covering the entire area. People here have to buy special terminals and pay network fees to get online. But now they can obviously save that money. And if Zhuoxia wants to obtain information here, it must spend energy and time to conduct a large-scale scan to understand the status of these marginal galaxies. Of course, there is no need to worry about whether it will be impolite to do so, after all, they can't find it. Nanling looked at the scanning results that kept appearing, and he asked in confusion. At least the technological level of the planet in front of us is still at the level of the mainstream star field 10,000 years ago, right? How did they do it? The implication is, how did they do so refusing to make progress? For this kind of information, Fanny was of course completely in the dark. Mo also had no idea about this situation, because even though Mo was a top student, she only knew that this place was very backward, and as for how backward it was and why it was so backward, it was her knowledge blind spot. But just when everyone was at a loss, a familiar voice coughed dryly, as if he had something to say. Fanny turned her head blankly. She felt that the voice was a little strange and familiar, as if she had heard it somewhere before. Nanling hurriedly said, "Senior Thongship, do you have anything to say?" Thongship stood up politely and said, "Yes, if you want to know the current situation of these marginal star systems, then I think I have the most say." Fanny looked dazed, as if she had just discovered that there was such a person on her ship. Mo's eyes lit up, and she said, "I remember, it is said that your home family originally came from the marginal star system?" Thongship nodded and said, "Our home family was originally one of the ruling families in the marginal star system, but since my grandfather, he has left the family and ventured into the ancient domain. It was not until my father pledged allegiance to Master Gychen that our branch was truly able to gain a foothold in the ancient domain." Fanny nodded her head and realized that Thongship beside her had such an origin. She asked, "Then tell me, why do people here always stay like this?" Thongship said, "Because it's to maintain the rule." This was an answer that Nanling and others expected but still shocked. In order to maintain the rule of those upper families, the development of science and technology here is artificially restricted. Because the rulers are worried that ordinary people will want to overthrow their rule after they have more advanced knowledge and thinking. Nanling asked puzzledly, "But there are so many people in this marginal galaxy, there must be someone who can go out, right?" Thongship said, "I know that too well. Those who go out will either never come back, and once they come back, they will receive an invitation from the ruling family and become one of the upper class." Thongship said it simply, but everyone present knew that in order to maintain such an iron curtain rule that almost isolates everything, there must be many cruel things and systems. Chapter 432 Role-playing. Although the situation in the fringe system was not so comfortable, the Fuchsia was here to look for traces of the nether locusts, so no one on the ship had any intention of intervening. Nanling thought for a while and said, "This kind of place is full of good and bad people, and it is impossible to collect intelligence efficiently, so I want to adjust everyone's identities." Everyone nodded after hearing this, and Fanny said, "Then how do you decide to arrange it?" Nanling said, "Since Senior Thongshi is originally from the home family of the fringe system, then let's restore his identity. He is a young man who is unwilling to be lonely and formed his own adventure group, with 2 maids." He pointed at Fanny and Mo, then pointed at himself and said, "And a guard." He pointed to the brown planet in this planetary system and said, "I accepted the task of investigating and cleaning up the bugs and came here to experience life." Mo almost laughed out loud when he heard this. He felt that Nanling's temporary character setting for Thongshi was exactly what Fanny said. Fanny didn't hear it. She patted Thongshi's shoulder and said, "Hey Xiao Hong, this time you are lucky. Mo and I will be your maids. Are you touched?" Thongshi didn't dare to move. He looked at Nanling with a very painful and resentful look, as if he would shorten his life. Fanny was excited again. She said, "I think you can be more flamboyant and do something to bully men and women. Otherwise, how can you win people's trust?" Thongshi was about to cry. How could he bully men and women in front of the eldest lady? Seeing this, Fanny said boringly, "Forget it. Why are you so easy to be amused?" Nanling smiled and said, "In fact, you do need to be more domineering. After all, I just looked at the scan information. The upper-class families in this marginal galaxy are used to oppressing the lower-class people. If you show the humility and courtesy in the ancient domain, it will seem out of place. Isn't it this kind of arrogance and domineering that the people in power and the superiors in the marginal galaxy want?" Mo nodded and said, "Xiaonan's words make sense. I think you know what to do, Thongship. But in fact, there is no need to really do what Fanny said, bullying men and women. You just need to be domineering to those so-called superiors and ignore ordinary people." Thongship breathed a sigh of relief. "If that's the case, it's fine." Fanny said, "Okay, now that our new identity has been decided, how can we make the people over there believe it?" Li Ji interrupted and said, "I can just hack into their space station system when I dock. This is very simple." After everyone discussed it, they flew to the space station outside the brown planet together. The ancient Kyushu-class starship seemed to be a great thing to outsiders, but in the eyes of the people in this space station, the first time the Fuchsia entered the port, the other party sent a message. "Unknown Kyushu-class starship, please provide the navigation identification code. This is to facilitate us to provide the best service." Please forgive us. Very humble. At this time, there was no need for the people on the bridge to say anything. Li Ji had already completed everything. Someone at the airport said immediately, "It turns out that this is the vehicle of Mr. Thongship. It is our great honor to be able to visit our brown Earth star space station." Thongship was still embarrassed. But Fanny said with a smile, "You're indeed Mr. Thongship. Don't be too restrained. Say something quickly." Thongship just felt awkward. He opened his mouth several times but couldn't say anything. Fanny looked at him speechlessly and said, "I didn't expect you to be so naive." She rolled her eyes and said directly, "Our Mr. saw the help message you posted and came here kindly. If you have any good things, bring them up to relieve the mistress' fatigue, so that we can go down to work for you." The bullying of men and women was vivid. However, Fanny said proudly, "Isn't this lackey's appearance real?" Nanling immediately gave her a thumbs up, indicating that it was too real. However, her next sentence broke his defense. "This is all learned from your appearance." Nanling was so angry that his teeth itched. This woman was really itchy. But there was nothing he could do, she was the boss. Nanling could only look at Mo with grievance and wanted to seek comfort from his sister. Unexpectedly, Mo actually nodded in agreement and said, "Not bad, it's already 60% similar." "Well, in your eyes, Li, Nanling is just a lackey." For some reason, Thongship didn't feel embarrassed now. The other side immediately nodded and said, "Yes, yes, we will welcome Master Thongshi and everyone on the ship." Fanny was now completely addicted to playing. She said, "No need to be so troublesome. Our master probably doesn't like the food in your broken place. Just bring us some interesting specialties to broaden our horizons." Thongshi smiled helplessly again. He found that he didn't need to act at all. The work was taken away by this arrogant and domineering maid. But the more Fanny did this, the less suspicious she was. After a while, they prepared some local specialties and came to the port where the Zhuoxia was docked. The hatch of Zhuoxia opened, and Thongship came out in a combat armor, followed by Fanny and Mo wearing female masks, and Nanling, the guard. Fanny, Mo and Nanling were not wearing combat armor, only Thongship was wearing combat armor, which was to highlight him. This was very ostentatious in this place, and of course it was in line with the character of the young master. A fat airport official ran up and saw this group of people, and he was sure that they were right without any doubt, and then flatteredly presented the specialty here. It was an eyeball full of dreamy brilliance made of colorful colored glass. Fanny, Mo and Nanling looked at this beautiful eyeball with obvious signs of crystallization with curiosity, and they were curious about how it was formed. Who knew that Thongshi's face changed when he saw it, and then he took the eyeball and said, "Colorful crystal eye, I didn't expect you to produce this here." "Okay, I got the thing, I'm quite satisfied, quickly arranged for us to go down." When the airport official saw that Thongshi actually knew the goods and didn't show much care, he knew that he had met a real rich man this time. He hurriedly said, okay, I'll arrange it right away." The official immediately led the way. Nanling asked in their small group channel, "Senior, is there anything wrong with this?" Thongshi said, "This colorful crystal eye, if I'm not mistaken, should have been dug out less than 10 days ago." Fanny asked in horror, "Is it dug out from a living person?" Thongshi said, "Yes, one of the specialties of the Edge Galaxy, the colorful crystal eye is a rare gem in the eyes of many people. It also has a very strong energy gathering property and is very precious. But it was dug directly from the eye sockets of some specific people." Chapter 433 Fall. An old but clean landing spacecraft slowly flew out from the brown Earth star space station. The 4 people sat in silence in the spacecraft without any expression. But in fact, Thongshi had already told everyone in the small group what he knew about the 5-colored crystal eye. In the marginal land, there is a tribe called the Eyeless Tribe. They may not have any blood relationship with each other and can come from any place on this planet. They usually come from miners' families. Their parents and ancestors deal with minerals containing radioactive dust day and night. They are born with the influence of radioactive dust, so their bodies have mutated. Only by chance can such colorful crystal eyes be born. And once such a child is born, their parents will sell the child to the management of this planet for centralized management. These children will have their eyes dug out after they grow up. They usually have 1 eye, and a few have 2 eyes with colorful crystals. And those whose eyes have been dug out are the Eyeless Tribe. They are gathered together to live and breed offspring in order to have a greater probability of giving birth to children with colorful crystal eyes. Fanny felt the hair on her body stand on end when she heard this. She said, "This is too terrible. It's like treating people like animals." Have they never thought about screening out the genes that produce colorful crystallize, and then performing gene modulation on animals to achieve mass production? Thongcha said, unfortunately, they don't have such advanced technology, so they can only rely on artificial selection to carry out breeding. Nanling suddenly interrupted and asked, is this a unique situation on brown Earth, or is it common? Thongcha said, it is not unique to brown Earth. Some planets with special radioactive minerals will produce similar mutations. But this brown Earth planet has been under the rule of the Brown Earth Interstellar Development Company for more than 400 years, and it is estimated that a group of eyeless people have been consciously gathered. The crowd chatted and then there was no sound, mainly because they were about to arrive, and they would see the world with their own eyes from now on. Just at this time, a storm hit, and the old landing ship was instantly swaying. The whole spacecraft was shaking rapidly in the storm, and looking down through the porthole, I saw countless sand and dust everywhere, and I couldn't see the surrounding scenery clearly in it. What's more terrifying is that there is a trace of radioactive dust in these sands and dusts, and normal people will weaken rapidly in them. But the people on this planet have gradually adapted to this situation. The only price is that their lifespan is very short. Nanling didn't expect to see this kind of reversion phenomenon here. Originally, the continuous improvement of human technology and productivity should have allowed the average lifespan of ordinary people to continue to increase. But here, according to the information obtained by Li Ji when she hacked into the space station, the average lifespan of people on this brown Earth planet is less than 30 years old. What's even more uncomfortable is that in order to ensure that it has enough miners, this Brown Earth Interstellar Development Company actually added aphrodisiacs to the living supplies provided to the various miner groups on the planet. What a cold and cruel behavior. In the eyes of this Brown Earth Interstellar Development Company, the various ethnic groups of humans who make a living by mining on this planet are just slaves raised, right? I always feel that the appearance of the dark locust on this planet is not a bad thing. Mo asked unexpectedly. Why do you say that? Nanling pondered for a while and said, I have discussed the dark locust with the Seeker of Knowledge, but the Seeker of Knowledge believes that the dark locust may not really be the natural enemy of all creatures. Everyone was attracted by this speculation and looked over. Nanling said, So Seeker of Knowledge gave me some primitive planets that showed no signs of invasion by nether locusts. Primitive life was thriving on those planets, and some were even Proxima Centauri of an invaded planetary system. They are so close, and there is thriving life, but they have not been invaded by nether locusts. Later, the caster also had anatomical data on nether locusts, which was one of the matters he cooperated with the Demon Mother. Guess what? The bodies of those ancient nether locusts actually contain a large amount of heavy metal components, and they can actually incorporate metal elements into their own metabolism. Correspondingly, the proportion of organic matter in their bodies is actually not large. Like the nether locust colony we encountered, it is because it has undergone tens of thousands of years of degeneration, which is why most of its body is composed of organic matter. Fana suddenly realized. I was wondering why the nether locusts I saw in the Galaxy Fairy were like metal bugs. Not only can they fly in space, but they can also spit out various energy attacks. This is simply a kind of biological machine, right? Nanling nodded. This was also the conclusion of the caster. It is not sensational, but in the various studies and inferences of these big guys, the nether locust is such an existence that is very similar to biological machinery. Mo said with a serious expression, if this is the case, then we should look for traces of the nether locust on this planet. It would be very dangerous if we leave it outside. Nanling also agreed. Fana said, do we need to look for things like nether locusts seriously? I think with the time we have wasted, they have already developed well, right? Nanling thought it made sense, but just before he spoke, the alarm on the spacecraft suddenly sounded, and then a shrill cry from the driver came from the cockpit. Enemy attack. Boom. With a loud bang, Nanling watched the front half of the landing spacecraft, including the cockpit, being directly blown away by a burst of hot molten plasma. Then only half of the spacecraft was left, and it instantly stalled and began to fall while spinning. Don't forget that you are still in a terrifying storm. The dust storm was rolling and drifting with this section of the spaceship, and it was about 4 small dots had already rushed out of the broken spaceship. Thongcha was wearing full combat armor with a wingsuit, using a shield to resist the flying sand and rocks. The other 3 people used the spiritual light released by their own spiritual treasures to protect their bodies, resisting the high-altitude storm and hovering in the air. Boom. The half of the hull also exploded in the air. But this is not over yet. Plasma cannons rose from all directions in the sky and shot directly at the sky above everyone. Seeing this, Nanling immediately said to Li Jino. 2 on his body. The space station is in danger, Zhuoxia will detach immediately. Li Jino. 2 said. It's too late. The main body reported that the entire space station has suffered a terrible attack. The space station is going to fall. Zhuoxia has no time to detach before entering the atmosphere. I'm afraid it will fall with the space station. Fana said immediately after hearing this. It doesn't matter. It's better to detach in the atmosphere and land directly on the surface of this planet. Next, we will use Zhuoxia as a base for activities. Chapter 434 The so-called safe landing. In the storm, everyone looked up at the sky and saw a huge fireball falling from the boundless sky. The plasma cannons below were still attacking, as if they couldn't wait for the space station to fall and wanted to disintegrate it in the air. At this moment, Li Ji sent a message saying, I have taken control of the entire space station system. It can hold up better than we thought. I may be able to land it safely, but the premise is that you can stop the attack from the ground. Nanling heard this without any hesitation, and his body was covered with pure faith. At the same time, many locations where plasma cannons were being fired appeared on the visor. The 4 people simply divided the area and then dispersed and rushed downward. The 2 pairs of wingsuits behind Nanling, which were unfolded by the Thunder Wing Jim Blade and the Fire Wing Flying Sword, were not slow at all in the atmosphere. In addition, he used the wind escape to shield himself from the influence of the storm. In fact, his flight in the atmosphere was definitely the most agile and swift. But it was obvious that his landing was also discovered by the enemy below. Not long after, many relatively small plasma rays greeted him. Nanling waved the long Xiangguofen gun in his hand quickly, forming a circular field in front of him. All the plasma rays that hit the circular field were bounced away. This is the improvement brought by Nanling's trip to the Immortal Boat. The feather gun is soft, slow and fierce. The 4 extreme intentions are combined together to form an ultimate force that combines offensive and defensive. This is the ultimate of art. Then he saw the situation below through the detector of pure faith. The Nether Locust is indeed a Nether Locust, and it is a special variant of the Nether Locust. The original huge front head has become a structure like a launch base, and the upright body has become an energy pipeline for transmitting plasma. Its upright tail head has become a plasma launch port and also has an aiming function. These individuals are lying on a radioactive mineral vein exposed on the surface. The huge head at the front absorbs a large amount of radiation energy in the mineral vein like a vacuum cleaner, and the head at the tail is constantly spraying plasma. Among them, some individuals lying on the energy-rich mineral veins will quickly expand their bodies because they absorb a large amount of radiation energy, becoming the kind of terrifying turrets that can directly hit from the ground to space. There are also many that have not touched the energy-rich mineral veins, maintaining a smaller body size and attacking Nanling like a defensive tower. A brand new form, we don't seem to have seen this kind of Nether Locust. Li Jino. 2 confirmed. From the current database, this is indeed a brand new form of Nether Locust. Nanling did not hesitate anymore, and the wind escape went straight down, and suddenly came to these Nether Locusts that looked like laser towers. The Fire Wing Flying Swords behind him instantly came together, and then shot out with a curtain of fire. Then the Thunder Wing Jim Blade also shot out, suddenly piercing through a huge Nether Locust lying on the rich mine over there. Boom. The plasma of the plasma was completely detonated by the lightning power in the Thunder Wing Jim Blade, causing a huge explosion. Amid the roar, the highly corrosive plasma spread out, swallowing up all the small Nether Locusts nearby. However, these small Nether Locusts were not afraid of the plasma at all, and even swallowed it quickly, and then fired stronger plasma cannons with a stronger posture. It must be said that the Nether Locusts exist for conquest and killing. Their various habits seem too unreasonable. But fortunately, after the largest Nether Locust was eradicated, these Nether Locusts could not evolve into individuals at the level of planetary cannons for the time being. Nanling himself simply merged into the wind and used wind escape to drive himself. The next moment, about 100 small Nether Locusts in a certain area suddenly encountered a gun that suddenly stacked out from the wind. Wind escape fast gun. Each of these guns seemed extremely fierce and extremely fast. In fact, this was actually Nanling using extremely fast wind escape to quickly shoot around this area. The guns shot out one by one and hit the effect of a group attack. If Nanling was theoretically invincible before but mostly used the advantage of the realm to deceive others, then now he can be said to have truly begun to realize his own cultivation and combat power. Of course, this was still a minor path for him. What he really cared about was how to lead the trend of this era with the way of cultivation. In this way, he turned into a wind full of sharp blades, and the limbs of the locusts were disintegrated wherever he passed. This was the inner circle. In the outer circle, 2 spiritual flying swords flew rapidly in an arc to capture the larger locusts. All the locusts at the planetary cannon level or about to become planetary cannons were strangled. The blue light spots that shot into the sky quickly became sparse. At this time, Nanling stopped and looked up to look around. He saw a terrifying thunderstorm coming to his left, which suppressed all the plasma cannons on the entire mountain at once. This was Mo's big move. Looking at the hill on the right, the screen was already full of red fire clouds. Fanny also used a big move. Looking at the hill on the other side, there were still some sparse plasma cannons launched into the air, but the vibrations caused by the explosions from time to time showed that Thongshi was also working hard there. The space station falling overhead had already passed over their heads. The entire space station was ablaze with flames. This was caused by the explosion caused by the attack, but more was caused by atmospheric friction. However, it was visible to the naked eye that the speed of the space station's descent was slowing down. Nanling understood and said, "It's the anti-gravity system." "Can the anti-gravity system of this space station complete the break before falling?" Li Ji replied, "It's impossible to stop completely. At most, it will change from a hard landing to a soft landing." Nanling looked up and watched the space station fall. The falling momentum was indeed weakened a lot. Soon Nanling saw the so-called soft landing. Boom! The ground under Nanling's feet shook, and then a violent explosion and flames splashed. The entire space station fell straight to the ground, causing a terrible shock. Even the originally fierce storm was temporarily dispersed by this shock. Is this a soft landing? The fire wing flying sword and the thunder wing gem blade immediately returned to his back, and then he jumped up and flew rapidly. On the way, he met up with Fanny and Mo, and soon they arrived at the crashed space station. There was hot molten magma everywhere, and metal fragments were everywhere, like a garbage dump. Nanling looked at the shattered space station and felt as if he had returned to the days on the desolate planet several years ago. At the time, he was also looking for a certain female brain in the wreckage of the explosion. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 435. Serious Pioneering Mission. The debris was spread all over the ground in front of Nanling. The last time he faced this situation, he was in the spirit of doing our best and leaving the rest to fate, but this time he was anxious about the safety of his relatives. He immediately asked, "No. 2. How is the Eudoxia? How is your original body?" As soon as he finished speaking, Nanling felt something strange above his head, and then looked up, and saw a huge outline looming in the storm. In his ears, Li Ji's proud voice sounded, "Ha ha, you're anxious." Nanling was speechless. Fanny patted him on the shoulder and said, "You have to have some confidence in our Eudoxia. It is the most advanced hunting ship. In addition to the cutting-edge technology of the ancient domain, it also has various technologies you got from the caster and the seeker. How can it fall down so easily?" Mo looked around the surroundings and asked, "Sister Li Ji, did you deliberately let this space station fall into this state?" Li Ji said, "I still can't hide it from Mo. After all, the people living here are all garbage, right? The anti-gravity engine does have some spare power, which can allow some people to survive, but why should I do that?" Li Ji said frankly. There is no doubt that her birth in the lower class made her full of resentment towards the people at the Brown Earth Interstellar Development Company. Nanling can understand this feeling. After all, he and Li Ji were both residents of the lower class area of Chenyuan 06, and they also lived a life of exploitation and oppression by the superior people. But in the lower class area of Chenyuan 06, no matter how suffocating it is, there is always a ray of hope for people to struggle out. But everything on this planet is so dark that it makes people despair. This is a planet with no future at all. Even if there are locusts raging, it is better than continuing to be exploited. Nanling has completely regained his composure at this time. He said, "Sister Li Ji, you did a good job. It's just that if this space station can remain intact, it can bring a lot of help to the people on this planet." Li Ji smiled and said, "I knew you would say that, so I said it was a soft landing. Don't worry, I have calculated that the structure of the key parts of the space station is not damaged. It even has 2 solar units that can operate normally. As long as the people here have a little technology, they can rely on the solar unit to turn on the quantum computer on the space station. I have stored enough scientific and technological knowledge in it. Nanling was very relieved to hear this. He felt that Sister Liji really understood him. If this kind of handy thing can really help the humans here return to the civilized world, it would be a good thing. As for taking all the people here away personally, he didn't have this idea, and he didn't think it was right to do such a big thing. They just need to leave the possibility of change. The storm quickly extinguished the fire here. They quickly flew over the entire crash zone and found that only the outer part of the space station was destroyed, and the core area was still intact. This was like a gift package from heaven for the people who stayed on brown Earth. Thongcha stood silently aside and suddenly said, "Actually, there is no use doing this. The person or tribe that gets the technology here first will soon mark this place as private land, and use the technology here to arm themselves and quickly unify the entire planet. Then they will do the same thing as the Brown Earth Interstellar Development Company, or even worse. Because they have always lived in such a cruel environment, and the only model of what to do after gaining power is the company. They will do nothing but imitate it." Nanling turned to look at Thongship, then nodded in agreement and said, "You're right, this is indeed a hidden danger. No, this is almost inevitable." Nanling hesitated, then said to Liji, "Then delete all the technology related to weapons, leaving only basic civilian technology, and then leave a method of cultivation." Liji said blankly, "What's the use of this? You want them to start practicing. But the effect of practice is too slow." "They might," Nanling said, "precisely because the effect is slow, there'll not be a situation where one company dominates." He shook his head and said, "I haven't thought about these things completely yet. Let's deal with the locusts here first." Everyone nodded when they heard this. This choice was correct. Mo said, "Fortunately, the field created by the phantom disk can also block the perception of the nether locusts, so we can be much more at ease." Fana said, "That's right. Let's start a deep scan of the entire planet first, and then immediately move in stealth before the nether locusts notice the abnormality and surround us. I want to know the scale of the insect nest here." Nanling thought for a while and said, "We can also capture some of those plasma nether locusts and send them to Tianzing Star as samples. I heard that the book collector likes to collect various individuals of nether locusts." Mo nodded and said, "Okay, I'll go catch some now." Nanling said, "I'll go catch them to make cages." The folding space technology provided by the Seekers of Knowledge can be used to make space cages. Fana saw that the two assistants had things to do, so she said, "Okay, then Sister Liji and I will be responsible for finding the insect nest. Thongship, you go and find a way to find out about the humans on this planet. It's quite curious that they can coexist with nether locusts on this planet." Thongship took the order and left. The members of the Zhuoxia team were busy with their work, and it felt like a pioneering team carrying out a pioneering mission. Mokw's plasma locusts were very quick. With her current understanding of electromagnetics, she could create a confining magnetic field to lock a plasma locust in it immediately. Nanling modified the space cargo box used to hold fresh food on the Zhuoxia. He divided the space into different parts, and then threw the newly caught fresh food in. The couple worked together and captured 8 plasma locusts in one go before they stopped. At this moment, a strong wind suddenly whistled over their heads. It was the Zhuoxia that began to change the scene under Fana's command. The high-power scan just now had made the locusts restless, so they naturally had to change places. The place to regroup had been marked in their respective systems, and the field staff could go to the new gathering place to meet up. Nanling carried the folded fresh food cargo box weighing several tons, just like carrying a pipe, and flew behind his wife. It's not that it can't create a traction magnetic field, but when the folding cargo box is in operation, it is somewhat sensitive to the external magnetic field, which may have some adverse effects on the living things inside. The storm on this brown Earth planet has risen rapidly again. They flew quickly at high altitudes under the power of the storm and soon saw a huge conical mountain. It was really surprising that such a high mountain would not be worn down by the violent atmospheric environment on the surface of this planet. Nanling thought it was difficult to have such a high mountain on this planet. Zhuoxia stayed at the top of this mountain, which was also their best parking place after scanning the entire planet. Chapter 436 Preparing for a new experiment. This mountain is very large and has a very strange structure. It is like a huge dark brown rock cover, inverted on the ground. When Nanling arrived at the top of the mountain, he saw a huge crater with a diameter of 1 kilometer. The Zhuoxia was anchored in the magma of the crater. The armor on the outside of the Vuoxia looked like the Kyusua class, but its materials were much more advanced than the backward alloy materials of the Kyusua class, so it was not damaged at all even when bathing in the magma. Nanling stood on the deck of the spaceship and asked the robot to move the fresh food cargo hold in, then asked, "Did you find anything?" Li Ji said, "We found 17 underground nests of holocasts. The amazing thing is that most of these nests are located deep in important high-energy mineral veins. And outside the mineral veins are local humans who make a living by mining. They have not made any threatening moves against these local humans." Nanling said, "This is a phenomenon worth observing, but have you found any signs of the existence of the king worm?" Li Ji said, "No individuals similar to the king worm were found. The scale of these 17 insect nests is basically in the same order of magnitude, and they act according to different rules. For that time being, it is impossible to tell which insect nest has the trace of the king worm." Fana said, "No matter what, we will clean up the nests one by one, and we will always find something." She still missed the little pet she caught that year. There was nothing much to say to everyone, and now they just waited for Thongship to complete the investigation and return. It is common sense that it is best not to use long-distance communication on a planet where the locusts are active, because once the locusts, which are extremely sensitive to various radio waves, catch these fluctuations, they will gather around the source. While waiting, Nanling was also thinking about some interesting questions alone. On the deck, there was a scorching red magma fire all around. In this scorching environment, the deck was very comfortable with a cool breeze. Nanling's ability is like this, which allows him to live comfortably at all times, and can be called a humanoid central air conditioner. Mo looked at him in a trance and asked, "Are you still thinking about how to settle the people on this planet?" Nanling nodded and said, "Yes, it's too difficult. The people here have been corrupted by those hateful bastards. It's too difficult to save them once their hearts are corrupted." Mo said, "There's nothing we can do about it. If the people here want to survive, they must abandon morality. And the fault is that Brown Earth Interstellar Development Company, it's none of your business." Nanling shook his head and said, "Don't worry about me. I just thought about it casually when I hit time. Whether it succeeds or not is up to God." Mo nodded and said nothing more. While they were chatting, an unexpected visitor suddenly arrived. It was the Seeker of Knowledge, who came directly with his consciousness projection. Obviously, the location of the Vuoxia was not difficult for the Seeker of Knowledge to locate, but I don't know how he bypassed the closure of the outer energy field. "Sir, why are you here?" Nanling said unexpectedly. The Seeker smiled and said, "I just came to inform you that the next stage of the experiment is ready. You can use your consciousness to send it to the survivor base over there at any time." Nanling asked in surprise, "Which project requires my participation?" The Seeker nodded and said, "To be precise, it requires the participation of the mind armor. We have tried many kinds of energy to open up the wormhole. In theory, gravity is the best means, but all failed. We are blocked, but under this blockade, we found that the power of the soul core is the most effective. Just like you can use your soul power to open up the wormhole, the soul core power can also do it, and even the soul core power with a more single attribute can perform better in some aspects." Nanling suddenly realized something when he heard it. He knew that this was hoping that he would use the soul armor to conduct the drilling experiment. This is indeed a good idea. Even if a soul armor is sacrificed, for Nanling, the most he will lose is the effect of the golden elixir nourishment during this period of time. As for the soul armor, naturally, the Foundry will be responsible for giving him a new one. He was happy to participate in such an experiment. After all, it was an exploration of the upper limit of human civilization. For this, he did not even consider the reward. But the Seeker of Knowledge thought about it for him. He said, "In return, we will also give you the method of making the mind armor. By the way, I have also made a mind armor for the other 4 people on your ship. Now it is in the final debugging stage. When you transmit your consciousness here later, you'll have your own mind armor." Nanling was quite surprised by this. Mo was right next to him and asked in surprise, "Are we involved too?" The Seeker smiled and nodded and said, "Your mental armor was originally part of the plan. Once Nanling's initial experiments are over and we have obtained complete data, we will start to tailor a set of mental armor for each of you." Nanling said thoughtfully, "The ruins in the base in the Galaxy Fairy Locust Plague section." The Seeker said frankly, "It looks like you've guessed it. Yes, it's there. It's a magical place. If you want to unlock the mysteries locked in it, you must first solve the locusts." Mo was moved and said, "It turns out that you are really looking for the right person to develop the game Galaxy Fairy." The seeker said, obviously, we found it. Nanling hesitated and said, can you ensure safety? The seeker said, so there is mental armor. Go explore with mental armor. Of course, you have to clean up the locusts near the ruins before that. Fanny also heard the news and rushed over. She was in a very good mood when she heard that she also had a mental armor. She hurriedly urged Nanlin, saying, since the seeker of knowledge has come to see you, hurry up and do your thing. We can take care of things here. Even if we need to clear out the insect nest, there is no rush. It was as if Nanling would lose his mental armor if he was slow. Nanling looked at Fanny helplessly. What else was he going to say? Mo smiled and said, don't worry, go and change your mind so that you don't have to keep guessing about things here. Unlike Fanny, Mo wanted Nanling to go out and relax. Although the ultimate goal was the same, the different starting points gave Nanling a completely different feeling. After all, the wife who got married knew how to care for him. So Nanling nodded to the seeker on the other side and said, please wait a moment, sir. I will prepare for the consciousness transmission. The seeker nodded with a smile, and then said to Fanny and Mo, if you two have free time, you can also transmit your consciousness to this coordinate. There are mental weapons prepared for you there, so you can adapt to it in advance. The next moment, they no longer cared about the work of clearing out the nether locusts. They couldn't wait to see their new bodies. Chapter 437 Polarity Module. His consciousness passed through a dark tunnel and went to the other side of the distant galaxy again. He didn't know if it was because he had been studying wormholes and space more recently, but Nanling always felt that this dark tunnel was so similar to a wormhole. His consciousness awakened in another body. Mr. Nan, you are finally here again. A surprised voice sounded, and at this time Jio discovered his awakening. Speaking of which, if Li Ji found out that he had a digital life serving him here, would she call him a scumbag? He didn't want to do that either. Who knew that Jio would make such a strong choice to protect his colleagues? Nanling respected Jio very much. He said, it's been a bit busy recently. How were everyone's experiments going? Jio said, we found that the expansion of wormholes can only be done by spiritual power or spiritual core power. This is very wrong, because these two powers are actually universal hard solutions to many difficult problems. Although they can be solved, they are not efficient. Nanling nodded and said, obviously, gravity has always been a technology related to space. We can even easily make folded space, but we can never break through the distance limit to achieve space crossing, Jio said. Anyway, we are already on the way. This is indeed an exciting thing. Anyway, they are already on the way. Nanling was brought to a small aircraft, which is a bit like a jellyfish. There is a 3-meter long and 2-meter wide square under the aircraft. This is Nanling's cockpit, which is just enough to accommodate the spiritual weapon. The tail end of the latter aircraft has a dozen tentacle-like tail structures. These tails will open out in all directions after the aircraft is started. Many detection devices cannot be used in the space channel inside the wormhole, so Jia thought of this tail structure, using this soft and slender multi-tail structure to monitor the state of the space channel around the aircraft. This structure is very interesting. Whose idea is it? Nanling praised. Jia said embarrassedly, Mr. Nan, that was my idea, and I am fortunate to be favored by the Lord Caster. Nanling nodded and said, very good, keep this way of thinking, you were a very good scientist. He was very glad that Jia did not seem to have become a stubborn brain. Then he asked again, there is a detection in the back, so what about the front? Jia said, I designed a multi-eye structure, which can ensure that all the changes in light and shadow around are collected. After all, when all ways of detecting the essence are ineffective, we can only try to summarize the situation through visual representation. Nanling went around the head of the small spacecraft and saw a dense circle of light eyes. Good guy. When he saw it suddenly, Nanling felt that he had traveled to the world of Krul. So, this kind of thing can also end up in the same place. Nanling tried to stand under the spaceship, and then he saw that the spaceship suddenly stood up, allowing Nanling to enter the square groove. Nanling jumped up lightly. As a result, the next moment, the square groove rotated and brought him into the cockpit of the spaceship. This is a very space-saving design. Because of the characteristics of this wormhole exploration, every space on this spaceship is stuck tightly, and there is almost no margin. Nanling felt that he was standing in the cockpit at this time, but he knew that he would be in a horizontal state during the flight. This posture actually made it easier for him to control the center of gravity and sense the direction. At this time, his front lit up, and what he saw was actually the scene outside. He seemed to have changed his perspective and could see everything around him 360 without dead angles. And what he saw was very detailed, and he could even see the microorganisms growing on the walls of the laboratory. Or he could see through the stomachs of the surrounding experimenters to see what they had eaten for lunch. Such a detailed observation perspective also made countless information flow into Nanling's brain at this moment. Fortunately, his body was armed with the mind at this time, and the semi-biological brain in his head could definitely process so much information. Nanling's own thinking ability could also process this information in time, but if he did so, it would consume a lot of mental power and it might not last long. At this time, Jiao's voice came from this space. This is the detection ability of the 100-eye shuttle. What do you think, Mr. Nan? Nanling said. It is indeed very powerful, but it consumes too much of my mental energy. It's a pity that if my real body was here, it would definitely be able to maintain a state of meticulous observation for a long time. Jiao said. Don't worry, Mr. Nan, I will go with you this time, and I will handle the redundant information for you. You just need to focus on this mission. Nanling was surprised and said. You want to load your core code into this 100-eye shuttle? Then if you encounter danger, you can't come back. Jiao said. But I can help Mr. Nan. It is my honor to be able to live and die with Mr. Nan again. Nanling was speechless and suddenly moved. Because everyone felt that this was an inevitable exploration and development, and Nanling's spiritual armor was a necessary price. But it seemed that only Jiao regarded this spiritual armor as Nanling's life, and he was willing to go through the adventure with it. For this reason alone, Nanling regarded Jiao as a true friend worth making friends with. He said, you don't have to do that. Just leave me an AI program to assist in solving the problem. Assisting in information processing, this kind of thing can be done by an AI. You'd better stay in the laboratory. You will be more needed here. After all, the experiment is not just this one opportunity. You may have to prepare a second, third or even more experiments for me. Jiabu seemed to be convinced after hearing this. He did not insist anymore, but just wished sincerely. Then I wish you good luck. Nanling nodded and said, now, quickly introduce to me the functions of this 100-eye shuttle. Jiabu said, first of all, it is the 100-eye system of the 100-eye shuttle. So has personally experienced it, so we will not go into details. And there are the 12 tentacles, which can perform contact-type exploration in 12 directions. Of course, they can also be manipulated to do something else when necessary. Also, the spacecraft is loaded with a polarity module called Rock King Pillar, which uses the defensive polarity of the Earth-attributed spiritual core power. It has been verified to be the best polarity for opening wormholes and resisting space contraction. Nanling frowned and said, but I am not good at Earth attribute. Jiao said, we have considered this. Although you can activate all functions of the polarity module of this Rock King Pillar by injecting the power of the spirit core, this experiment is ultimately based on you, so the second polarity module position of the spacecraft has been left empty for you, so you can decide which polarity to use. Rock King Pillar, that sounds like an extremely high-level Earth spell. So what kind of polarity module should he use to match it? Nanling did not hesitate and said directly, let's use the wind one. Jiao said with some embarrassment. The Terror Storm Polarity Module. Or the Swift Spirit Polarity Module. Sorry, Mr. Nan, most of the wind-related polarity modules here are used for attack or acceleration. Nanling said. There is a way to help me gather the wind. I can transform the spiritual core power of the wind myself, but it will consume more energy. Jiao immediately said. Got it, we can use the Storming Divine Wind Polarity Module. Nanling unexpectedly checked this polarity module and found that it was really developed from a high-level wind spell. The value of this high-level spell is actually more in the auxiliary aspect. Its principle of accumulating wind power and then exploding it in an instant can enhance the power of any wind spell to another level. He said happily, that's it, load the new polarity module, and then we are ready to start the experiment. Chapter 438 Wormhole Shuttle. When everything was ready, Nanling's 100-eye shuttle was waiting for the launch command at the launch position in the hangar. The countdown begins. 10, 9, 8. The calm voice of Jia sounded in Nanling's ears. This was his ship-borne AI Jia 2. Nanling felt very subtle when he heard the countdown. His sister Li Ji gave him a Li Ji 2, but Li Ji 2 turned into the real Li Ji at any time. So what about Jia 2? Because of the previous experience, Nanling's heart was overshadowed. But at this moment, the countdown of Jia 2 had ended. With the sound of launch, Nanling no longer hesitated and let the 100i shuttle shoot out from the launch port. The speed of the 100i shuttle was extremely fast. It was worthy of being produced by Xincan Pioneer. Even this kind of single-soldier aircraft has achieved the extreme. A phantom flashed in the void, and the 100i shuttle came directly to the range of the wormhole. At this time, a huge space station was built around the wormhole. Its majestic giant nuclear fusion reactor continuously provided energy to stabilize and expand the entrance of the wormhole. Under the infusion of energy, the entrance of the wormhole turned into a bright white tunnel, as if it was rendered into a glowing white hole. This is a stupid way, but only the Xincan pioneers can use this stupid way. Nanling even heard that because the asteroid resources here are limited, the founder even used some high-end gravity technology to attract asteroids from the distant deep space for supply. This action can be said to be a big fanfare. But the founder didn't care whether his method would be discovered by the swallowing sky intelligent machine. After all, when Nanling discovered the key elements against these intelligent machines, the founder might have already developed stronger weapons against intelligent machines. Nanling had a full view of this time, as if his body had drilled into the white hole. However, the white brightness was only for a moment, and a moment later he entered a dark space, which was the space inside the wormhole. The 360 full view 100 eyes system was fully activated, and the 12 tentacles at the back also flew out to prevent anything that could avoid conventional detection from approaching. From Nanling's perspective, he was running quickly from light to darkness. The wormhole behind him, which was rendered incandescent by energy, was shrinking rapidly, and the darkness in front of him was rapidly expanding. Before long, the wormhole was only a small circle of light in Nanling's view, and there seemed to be something mysterious in the darkness in front. Without the interference of those high-energy lights, Nanling felt that the darkness was not really that dark, but had a deep green feeling. And under this dark tone, it seemed that countless things were hidden, which made him confused for a while. Mr. Nan, the structure of the space tunnel has been discovered, and the 100 eyes system is already recording the surface information of the space tunnel. Gino 2 reported the situation at a rapid speed. Nanling said, "What about the space contraction force in the tunnel?" Gino 2 said, "It is still within the radiation range of the mass energy generator, and the space contraction is in a controllable stage." Nanling nodded and said, "I will take over the 100 eyes system for a while. You count for 2 minutes. The time he can bear at this time is about 10 minutes. Using 2 minutes at this time is obviously to leave himself some margin." At that moment, even through the 100 eyes system instead of his divine consciousness, Nanling felt that he was shocked by the terrifying information flow. There were too many meaningless scenes in the space. He did not dare to be careless at all. He saw every detail clearly and even made some speculations and analyses. But in this way, no matter how amazing the thinking ability is, it will be exhausted. His mental power was rapidly consumed, so he cautiously ended this observation in advance after only 30 seconds. But after he finished his observation, he immediately said, "Gio, keep an eye out for similar signs for me. I suspect that these may be faults in the space tunnel." Gio responded, "Okay." Then he was surprised. "Did you find out?" Nanling smiled and said, "Because there is a digital life next to my body that has done similar things to you. The so-called No. 2 is just an excuse to run to my side from time to time." Gio was embarrassed and said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Nan, but I really..." Nanling shook his head and said, "No need to say more, I can't stop you from coming. Now that things have come to this, I can only be as cautious as possible. I must bring you back alive." Gio was very moved. He did take a risk, but he was willing to accompany Nanling to experience such an adventure. Because he found that his current identity was really embarrassing. His former colleagues had begun to distance themselves from him involuntarily, and the Xincan pioneers did not take him seriously. He lost his identity as a human being, and it seems that he has also lost the right to mingle with the crowd. Only when he is with Nanling can he feel the respect and kindness as always. There is no doubt that Gio, who became a digital life because of Nanling's will to protect him, is actually Nanling's companion digital life. This is very interesting. Nanling not only has a companion aunt, but also a companion brother. Gio said, "I have been recording the traces marked by Mr. Nan, and I have found a lot. According to Mr. Nan's guess, is there actually a space network behind the entire galaxy that is connected in all directions?" Nanling nodded and said, "This is just my guess, but it may take some time to verify this guess." Now let's collect information first, and go back and let the two star pioneers study it carefully. Gio suddenly felt a little weird when he heard it. Originally, the star pioneers were definitely high-ranking big figures in his eyes, and they needed him to look up to them. But after experiencing it with Nanling several times, he suddenly felt that the so-called star pioneers seemed to be not much different from the researchers in his laboratory. They all needed him to assign tasks to work. If they were not assigned to study on their own, they would be at a loss and have no direction at all. He just felt that Nanling was too cruel, and he was even surprised that he didn't feel any surprise about it, as if everything was supposed to be this way. Nanling said again, "The ultimate goal of our experiment this time is to travel to the other end of the wormhole and send back a message." "How long have we been traveling in the wormhole tunnel now?" Gio said. "It's been nearly 3 minutes, and according to calculations, we should have reached the halfway point." However, at this moment, the 12 tentacles spreading around sent a numbing alarm. Space contraction has begun. Chapter 439. Escape technique to save life. The space began to shrink. This was something that was bound to happen in this experiment. The solution that Xincan pioneers came up with was to use the Rock King pillar to hold it up. Open the Rock King pillar polarity module. Please inject the power of the spirit core, sir. Nanling did as he was told. Then a bright yellow crystal-like energy structure appeared around him, wrapping the entire 100 ice shuttle in it. He was like a bug wrapped in a piece of amber. The space contraction is intensifying. We must get out as soon as possible. Gio was already a little anxious. Nanling continued to move forward, but the contraction was too intense. When the tail tentacles of the 100 ice shuttle felt the extreme compression of the space, it was too late. The space in front of the 100 ice shuttle had closed, and the space behind it was the same. Only the 100 ice shuttle itself was stuck in the middle of this space tunnel because of the Rock King pillar, and it felt like it was neither up nor down. Nanling said, "The space contracted too suddenly. When can it be opened again?" Gio said with some frustration, "There is no way to find that pattern, and now it seems that the design of the Rock King pillar is not really reasonable. It can only keep us safe temporarily under the contraction of space, but," Nanling has already continued, "but this will not last long. He has begun to inject the power of the spirit core into another polarity module, storing the wind, accumulating the power of the wind spirit core, and then making a desperate attempt to save himself at this time. Storing the wind can certainly burst out powerful wind skills at once. But if Nanling operates it properly, he can use it in another aspect. Wind escape. That's right, he is going to use wind escape. He controls his own spirit core power to transform it into the wind attribute of the concept of flow. In terms of the spirit core power, it is the flowing wind polarity. Speaking of it, this can be regarded as his awakened talent at the beginning, but this talent has long been fully mastered by him and then completely integrated into his own ability system. Then the power in the Shenfen was also drawn out, and he desperately closed the Rock King pillar. "Sir!" Gio exclaimed, thinking that he was really going to die this time. However, the powerful spiritual core enveloped the entire 100 ice shuttle, and then turned it into a flowing wind. Wind escape technique. This can be said to be the strongest wind escape technique Nanling has ever performed. He turned into a stream of air rushing at a high speed, exerted the characteristics of seamless and impermeable, and drilled into the gap in front of him that had not yet closed. Then the problem came. From his wind escape perspective, he suddenly noticed that there seemed to be more than one gap in front of him, and even more than two. He suddenly felt the existence of 5 gaps. How could he drill in, and where should he drill in? Never mind, feeling that the power accumulated by the Shenfen was being consumed rapidly, he did not dare to hesitate and randomly chose a gap and drilled in. The divine wind was whistling, and he passed through this space tunnel at an astonishing speed. During this period, there were indeed cases where the tunnels accumulated and closed, but it seemed that since the tunnels already existed, even if the surface was closed, there would still be gaps. And as long as there were gaps, Nanling found that everything was much easier than he had imagined. A dazzling red light suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. It was already coming out from the other end. The scattered airflow had already wrapped around the 100 ice shuttle, and a storm suddenly arose in the void. However, the next moment, another more fierce storm was attracted, causing Nanling to immediately panic. That was the stellar storm. Nanling suddenly appeared next to a huge and scorching dark red star. This star was extremely unstable, and from time to time it radiated terrifying solar storms to the surroundings. Nanling was helpless and could only flee in a hurry. Fortunately, the materials used in the 100 ice shuttle were sufficient to temporarily resist. At this time, Geo spontaneously mobilized the remaining power in the 100i shuttle to perform the Rock King pillar, which was considered to have resisted this stellar storm. This should be a star at the end of its life cycle, with a very large volume. Otherwise, according to reason, wormholes should not appear so close to the star. He quickly moved away from the range of the starstorm. The speed of the 100i shuttle was not slow, and soon found a planet at the far end to stay. With a planet to resist the solar storm, even if it was only temporary, it was enough to make Nanling breathe a sigh of relief. The Rock King pillar was temporarily shut down to let the system cool down, and the 100i system was also turned on, starting to observe and locate the surrounding starry sky. Here, even the connection with the survivor's base was cut off. Nanling had to reposition and use the high-power quantum signal transmitter on the spacecraft to re-establish contact with the base. In the process, his heart experienced shock again and again. Because when he looked up at the sky, he saw a bright star. The starry sky here was abnormally bright, and the stars in the night sky even turned the night into day. He could even use the 100i system to directly observe the planets surrounding these stars. Nanling knew that this was because the distances between different stars were too close. The positioning results after several data calculations made him feel incredible. He had directly traveled through space to the center of the Milky Way. This place full of old, dead stars and chaotic debris is not safe for a moment. Just like now, not long after Nanling calmed down, he noticed a huge asteroid hitting this side at a high speed. Of course, this did not hit him directly, but the planet under his feet was in trouble. Boom! The Earth trembled and roared. If this planet still had an atmosphere, there would definitely be a circle of terrifying shock waves. And after the impact, there was a terrible volcanic eruption, and red magma covered the sky. Nanling saw this and thought it was nothing. He was already quite used to magma. He maintained the high-power signal transmission and asked, "Geo, how far have we crossed this time?" Geo said, "About 17,000 light years. This is an incredible breakthrough, sir, you succeeded." Nanling shook his head and said, "No, we succeeded. But there is another problem, that is, we obviously took the wrong path. This is not the location I explored last time." Geo sighed and said, "That's right, last time Sir used a brain nerve as a carrier of consciousness to pass through the wormhole. He only reached a place 900 light years away. The difference in the middle is too big. This mystery of space is indeed not something we can easily study and understand." Nanling took a deep breath and then said, "Haven't you contacted the survivor base yet?" Geo said, "In fact, I contacted the other 3 experimental bases of Mr. Castor and the pioneering spacecraft of Mr. Seeker at the same time, but there is no response for the time being." At this moment, another asteroid fell from the sky and crashed into the planet under their feet. Nanling said that it seems that we can't wait any longer and must travel through space again. Geo was surprised and said, "Sir, don't you need to take a rest?" Nanling said, "Don't worry, I know what to do after a while. It was too dangerous to stay here any longer, so it would be better to continue traveling." Anyway, he had discovered that the wind escape technique was the most suitable for this kind of travel. Chapter 440 Skycrosser. Nanling took a short break, gave his mind armor a breath, and then returned the same way. The solar storm that had erupted earlier had stopped, and it should be safe for at least a short moment. It might not be safe to stay on the planet either, as the occasional asteroid impacts really made him a little nervous. The powerful recovery ability of this mind armor also amazed Nanling. After such a huge consumption of shuttling through space just now, it was almost recovered after just taking a breath for half an hour. And this time Nanling was more prepared, so shuttling through space should not be difficult, right? He was a little unconfident. Because the space channel was too complicated, with so many forks in front of him, he really didn't know how to choose. If he got lost, he thought about it and felt that even if he got lost, it would be better than being in this unlucky place. So the accumulated divine wind was activated again, and with the 100i shuttle, it turned into a divine wind again and drilled into the wormhole that had shrunk like a pinhole. After entering, Nanling realized that the situation was better than he thought. He thought he would lose his way, but the high-energy reaction emitted by the mass-energy space station at the survivor base was like a firefly in the dark night, which immediately attracted Nanling's attention. Following the diffuse white light, Nanling fled in a straight line. It took him less than 5 minutes to pass through this space channel. He flew out again. A small spaceship broke out of the huge white ball of light, and then Nanling heard Jebu's cheers. "We're back. Restore communications, Lord Seeker of Knowledge, please access, Lord Caster of Metal, please access, and Lord Book Collector of Metal has also accessed the communication." Nanling looked at a series of communication requests. He simply answered them all, and then shared the experimental data neatly and said, "This is the experimental data this time. I think we succeeded. We have a way to directly cross space." The seeker of knowledge responded first. "Congratulations, I knew there would be such a day." The caster also said, "This is a success that we never thought of before the project of Mind Armor was launched. You're amazing." The beauty seeker praised, "The figure you showed up in the wormhole is full of beauty." At this time, the book collector paused, and said slowly, "Skycrosser, welcome to become a part of us." Nanling was at a loss. The seeker of knowledge smiled and said, "The book collector is giving people names again. Well, you deserve it. I agree that you are qualified to be a Xincan pioneer, because you have made amazing contributions." Nanling came back to his senses. From what the seeker of knowledge meant, if he succeeded in this adventure, he would be qualified to be a Xincan pioneer. The next moment, the caster and the beauty seeker all sent their blessings, and it was obvious that they also agreed. Nanling hurriedly said, "No, I'm actually just an ordinary Jindan cultivator." This sentence is self-deprecating, but there are actually many flaws. Anyway, the seeker of knowledge already felt speechless. An ordinary Jindan cultivator can carry 13 spirit arrays? The book collector said in a gentle and intellectual voice, "You don't have to belittle yourself. We are the Star Pioneers, a group of people who work tirelessly to find that direction for mankind to move forward. Each of us has made great contributions to mankind, so we can be Star Pioneers. Remember, the standard for Star Pioneers is not strength, but pioneering. And your pioneering achievements are as bright as the stars." Nanling was a little embarrassed by the praise. He said, "Geo is willing to take risks and conduct experiments with me. Without his assistance, I would not have succeeded." The book collector's elegant voice said, "He is very good, a good child, and perhaps he has a place in the future digital gods." This understated sentence made Nanling a little stunned. What does the book collector mean? Does the evolution of digital life into digital gods depend on the promise of the book collector? Or can he see through Geo's potential to become a digital god? Nanling thought for a moment, then said, "I'm already very tired. Can I return to my main body to rest for a while?" He actually wanted to recollect what he had gained today. Becoming a Xincan pioneer was a pleasant surprise. Perhaps he could get help from other Xincan pioneers or trade qualifications, but all this seemed less important to him. All he thought about was the insights he gained from traveling through space. Although the space channel became very narrow and it shrank, Nanling felt the seemingly endless vastness of the twisted void in a flash. His whole mind was taken away by the vast void, and at this moment, he wanted to return to his main body to think about it carefully. What Xincan pioneer? Just icing on the cake. Nanling's mentality changed. Even the Xincan pioneers, who were previously regarded as big brothers, only thought it was trivial. This was due to the recognition of the shortcomings of the Xincan pioneers themselves, and he finally raised his sights and vision to a sufficient level. The seeker of knowledge agreed, "Of course, we still have a lot of things to do. The information brought back by the Skycrosser this time is too important, and we all need to analyze it carefully. Next time, we will try to find a universal method." Nanling casually mentioned, "The mass energy space station is still very useful, but if you plan to use wind escape as a blueprint for the next crossing attempt, then you might as well try to change the mass energy space station to the wind spirit core power. Also, although I successfully completed the shuttle with wind escape, I think water escape, fire escape, lightning escape and other escape techniques may not be without a chance. Yes, maybe I can specialize in a rainbow transformation technique to deal with this situation." He started talking to himself. No one disturbed him, and the Xincan pioneers all retreated silently, because just the content heard in this soliloquy had already brought them great inspiration. So 2 more important projects were established. The possibility of escape techniques crossing wormholes, and the mass energy space station spirit core power transformation plan. Geo looked at this scene, and felt deeply moved again. His Mr. Nan began to assign tasks to the Xincan pioneers again. At the same time, he began to look forward to it. At this speed, perhaps humans will be able to achieve space travel within the Milky Way within 100 years. I don't know if it's an illusion, Geo just felt that the original human civilization was already a stagnant pool, so the Xincan pioneers had to detonate the intelligent machine crisis in advance to stimulate the development potential of mankind. However, he felt that there was already a kind of vitality next to Nanling. Chapter 441 Are They Still Human? Nanling's consciousness returned to his body. He checked the time and found that 10 hours had passed. Sister Liji, where are they? Nanling asked casually. Liji said, they have all been transferred to the Seekers and are adapting to their new bodies. Nanling was a little surprised, but he thought it made sense. He asked, what about Senior Thongship? Is he back? Liji said, he's back and he's gone there too. Now there's only an old lady like me who is unloved here. She looked pitiful. Nanling smiled and said, I'm here to accompany you. Since they've all gone to adapt to the mind arming, let's do the things on this planet. Liji chuckled and appeared in front of Nanling in her expensive crystal body the next moment. She said, come on, this time I'll show you my combat capabilities. As soon as she'd finished speaking, a huge spider robot stood up from the hangar. This was the war machine Liji had prepared. The spider vehicle was very large. When it was shrunk into a ball, it was a sphere with a diameter of about 6 meters. But when it unfolds, the spider legs alone are 8 meters long. And there are 2 cargo holds for robot soldiers hanging below. The cargo holds are space-folding cargo holds, and each hold can accommodate 1,000 fully armed robots. Just this spider vehicle can complete the battlefield deployment of more than 2,000 combat robots. Seeing that she was so interested, Nanling let her temper do what she wanted. The spider vehicle crawled directly out of the hangar of the Zooxia, and Nanling was taken to the first nearby insect nest in the vehicle. They did not encounter many obstacles along the way. The locusts on this planet always felt like they were fighting guerrilla warfare with them. They seemed very smart. Nanling smiled and said, maybe the kingworm has suffered several losses at the hands of humans, so it knows that it has to avoid humans when it is not strong enough. Liji said, that is really a big threat. I'm a little worried about what we should do if the kingworm of the underworld locust is not on this planet. Nanling was also slightly stunned, then shook his head and said, if it is not here, then it is not here. The underworld locust is far from being our enemy at this time, and even the intelligent machines are not the enemy of mankind. Our enemy is always only this galaxy. When we can get out, we will really have a bright future. Otherwise, we will be trapped here sooner or later. As he said this, he finally realized why he was unanimously recognized as the latest star pioneer skycrosser by the big guys after he came back from the wormhole. Because what he did before did bring more possibilities and a larger living space to mankind. As he sighed like this, the spider vehicle had already passed a human village. Nanling noticed the eyes of the humans here. They were all full of fear and vigilance, and were very afraid of this spider vehicle. This is understandable, but what Nanling couldn't figure out was, how did they settle on top of the insect nest? Out of curiosity, Nanling simply walked out of the spider vehicle and stood in front of this group of brown earth natives. The next moment, he suddenly felt very uncomfortable. Because he saw a huge gap. These brown earth humans were added, with irregular tumors, rotten pits and even deformed hyperplasia on their bodies. Almost none of them looked like normal human aesthetics. Nanling felt uncomfortable because they should have been human, but they were forced to look like this by some people. Nanling could see that these people were rapidly evolving to adapt to the high radiation environment of this planet. Some of the deformities in these people also have many commonalities, that is, this abnormal deformity that should have been a genetic mutation is becoming a bloodline characteristic and is passed down. Perhaps the radiation environment of this planet also accelerated the process of gene fission, but the despicable things that the company did to reproduce the population of brown earth were the real culprit. Liji's crystal body stood beside Nanling, facing these deformed humans calmly and said, they all have trace amounts of radiation escaping from their bodies. Perhaps this is the reason why the hell locusts think they are not humans, but just some native species on this planet. Nanling nodded and said, yes, the information I got from the Seekers shows that the ancient hell locusts were not actually murderous. They are very docile when they are not hungry, and they even ignore the small animals they feed. They only hunt when they are hungry. However, in most cases, they are in energy-saving sleep, unless they are awakened by electromagnetic waves. Mo said, so now, have we woken up the hell locusts underground? She was right. As soon as she'd finished speaking, the ground in the valley here began to rumble and vibrate. At the end of the village, in the mine cave attached to the mountain, a group of tightly wrapped miners fled out in a panic, shouting, monster, dig out the monster. The next moment, as these miners ran out, a large group of short dart locusts soon emerged from the cave. These dart locusts looked like the underdeveloped lower half of the head of a complete dart locust. Although they were small, they were swift and fierce, and obviously belonged to the ground combat force. Nanling waved his hand and signaled the spider vehicle to suppress fire. Soon, a row of 3-element series weapons were opened on the outside of the 8 legs of the spider vehicle, and a round of fierce firepower output was launched at these dark locusts, and soon the dark locusts were suppressed. This is also the reason why Nanling gradually stopped taking the dark locusts seriously. He had fought against the powerful individuals of the ancient dark locusts, so how could he take these modern individuals that were severely degraded and had not yet fully recovered seriously? The locusts that rushed out of the mine were quickly eliminated, and Nanling returned to the spider vehicle. As the spider vehicle shrank its body and rushed into the not-so-spacious mine, the sight of the brown Earth Star villager outside was completely cut off. Nanling turned back quietly at this time, as if looking back at those people. Li Ji asked, "What's wrong? Do you feel sympathy?" Nanling shook his head and said, "No, I just feel that in their eyes, we are probably not much different from monsters." Li Ji asked, "Are they still human?" Nanling shook his head and said, "I don't know, it depends on how they perceive it in the future. Let's change the information in the space station's crash module later, and talk more about the origin of human culture. They are not much different from wild beasts now. After all, whether they are human or not depends on their self-perception. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 442 New Breed. The spider vehicle traveled rapidly through the underground mine tunnel. The 8 spider legs alternated in front of the mine at a very high frequency, and then the main body squeezed through the narrow mine tunnel. This high-tech vehicle has long had many solutions to break through the terrain restrictions. The tunnel area was quickly broken through, and Nanling came to a complex underground space in the spider vehicle. Li Ji said, "This is the underground kingdom of this insect nest. They seem to think that this maze-like structure can withstand us." There was not much sense of caution in her words. After all, the locusts on this planet look powerful, but they have not fully entered the interstellar era. Or it is just like humans have just entered the interstellar era not long ago. If humans encountered such an opponent 50,000 years ago, they would probably be very distressed, but now, the spider vehicle did not pay any attention to the locusts that surrounded the tunnel, and directly dug in a straight line downwards. These locusts are good at everything, but the only thing they can't do is construction. Their body fluids can corrode a variety of superalloys, but they can't build their own nest well. All the way down, the spider vehicle easily broke through the dome above the insect nest, and then appeared upside down above the empty underground space of the insect nest. At this moment, countless locusts raised their heads and looked at the sky. It was not known whether it was Nanling's illusion, but he seemed to see the fear in the eyes of these locusts. It was as if this spider vehicle was a terrible monster that invaded their country. This feeling surprised Nanling. Could locusts have emotions? He had always thought that locusts were ruthless killing machines. How did they have wisdom? Just when Nanling was curious, Li Ji had already started the operation. She first controlled the mechanical legs of the spider vehicle to deploy the 3-element weapons to suppress the barrage below. Then, the bottom of a cargo hold under the torso was opened, and the battle robots armed to the teeth jumped out of it like dumplings. Their 3-element weapons were extremely effective in attacking these severely degraded locusts. As more and more robots were released, the activity space of the swarm in the insect nest was soon greatly compressed. Nanling noticed at a glance that among the insect swarm, a white, fat thing was trembling and running away. It seemed to want to drill into the tunnel on the other side, but the tunnel was too small and it was stuck at the entrance and couldn't get through. "Is that the king insect?" Li Ji asked. She didn't have much information about the king insect. Nanling looked carefully and shook his head and said, "No, the king insect is more delicate and small than it. It seems to be just an individual with reproductive function in the insect swarm. And it seems that the insect swarm here is protecting it, which means that it is the actual controller of this insect nest." Nanling couldn't tell, but he knew that there were many people in the world who would be interested in this kind of thing. In addition, his current identity was different, so he simply called the Seeker of Knowledge. "Skyless, why are you looking for me?" The Seeker of Knowledge responded very gently. Nanling directly transmitted the image of the white, plump fleshworm, and then said, "This is an individual I found when I was cleaning up the swarm of insects in the Edge Galaxy. I have never seen such an individual." The Seeker of Knowledge was indeed interested. He said, "If it is convenient, can you ask the Skycrosser to capture some samples? By the way, the book collector should also be interested in this. I will ask him to come over now." As soon as the voice fell, another communication was connected. Liji trembled. She was confused. Are all the people that Nanling is socializing with so high-end now? These are all Xingcan pioneers. She is also in this communication at this time, and she always feels that she is not qualified. But when she thought of herself as Nanling's companion old aunt, she suddenly seemed not so worried. People value Nanling, not her, and it is natural for Nanling to get this honor. After learning about the situation here, the book collector said, "If I am right, this should be a brand new individual evolved by this group of locusts to cope with the current situation." According to the social structure of locusts, the Emperor insect controls everything, and the King insect can control all locusts in a star system. In this case, the lower level rulers are completely unnecessary, because the King insect's mental control can cover the entire planetary system. But according to what the Sky Jumper said, this group of locusts originated from a king insect whose genes were modified by humans. Its upper limit is to control a planetary system, but it cannot control only one planetary system. It is in this situation that this kind of ruler who is lower than the king insect appears. Their mental power can't even cover the entire planet, and they can only operate in insect nests. Nanling nodded repeatedly after listening. This book collector is worthy at being a master of locust research. He now suspects that all the content related to locusts in Galaxy Fairy Locust Disaster originated from this person. Nanling asked hesitantly, "Mr. Book Collector, will this nether locust cause harm to the current human beings?" Book Collector Wen Yang comforted him in a calm tone, "Don't worry, the genetic restrictions of creatures like nether locusts are greater than you think. The upper limit of the king worm is the king worm. Even if humans have genetically enhanced it, it is just a special king worm. Besides, even if the king worm appears, so what? The human beings now are not the human beings tens of thousands of years ago. Don't forget, you were a team that can directly resist or even defeat the disaster of nether locusts." Nanling felt much more comfortable after hearing this. It's true that the nether locusts are terrible, but that was only in the past. The nether locusts in the past could destroy the civilization of the entire galaxy, but since humans have regarded them as imaginary enemies for tens of thousands of years, they are actually not that terrible. Nanling himself laughed. After all, humans are a civilization that grew up from crazy evolution. At this time, the seeker of knowledge suddenly said, "In fact, we decided to give these nether locusts a limited laissez-faire." Nanling was surprised. He asked, "Isn't one intelligent machine crisis enough?" The seeker said, "Because we found that human civilization needs external crises to squeeze out its internal potential, otherwise they will only destroy themselves in comfort. In other words, this is a civilization that must be rolled up in order to develop." Nanling was not against this kind of thing, but said helplessly, "But in this way, there will be constant wars." The book collector also said in a gentle voice, "For individuals in civilization, this may not be a good thing, but for the entire civilization, as long as the challenge is controlled within a certain degree, it is an effective tempering." Nanling was speechless when he heard this. Perhaps this is right. Although war is terrible, if peace lasts for a long time, the evil spirits hidden in the peaceful and prosperous times may be more terrible. Chapter 443. The spatial ability of the Dark Locust. The killings brought by Nanling continued. He also came out of the spider vehicle. The 4 iron wings on his back just spread out slightly, and he appeared in front of the big white and fleshy insect. At this moment, the fleshy insect suddenly raised its very small head and roared silently at Nanling. Nanling felt a strong mental impact coming at him like a tidal wave. This mental power was even stronger than that of the king insect in Chinyuan 06. But Nanling is no longer the same as he was back then. His golden elixir is not broken now, and his own spiritual power is also extremely powerful. Especially when he was sending his spiritual power, he experienced too many things, so when his spiritual power moved at this time, he resisted it without any suspense. If the spiritual power of the streaky meat locust was like a tidal wave, then Nanling's spiritual power was like a deep and majestic mountain. His spiritual power not only held up, but also pushed back in one breath. The spiritual power pressed on the streaky meat all of a sudden, and Nanling actually felt the fear in the heart of this thing. It's afraid of him. Nanling felt this very clearly, and then chuckled. The thunder wing gem blade behind him separated and flew out, releasing a strong confinement magnetic field to lock the streaky pork in. Then in the confinement magnetic field, the streaky pork was lifted up in the air and went out together. At this time, the spider vehicle returned to the original route first, quickly digging a passage for Nanling along the way. And those combat robots were in the rear to resist the desperate counterattack of the insect swarm. Their boss was caught, which was very fatal. Nanling even quickly analyzed the status of this street report in the insect swarm. The Hades locust is a species with obvious functionalization and modularization. They can reproduce themselves, but the reproduction of ordinary Hades locusts is a very inefficient self-division, which is not enough to maintain the diversity and size of the population. For example, when Nanling was in Dust Edge 06, he encountered a kind of insect that threw its own larvae as bombs. The king insect and the streaky meat that he caught now were individuals that can reproduce and expand the insect swarm. Nanling's mind was racing, and he had already analyzed the situation of the streaky meat. Then he said to the book collector in the communication, "This new species, perhaps we can call it the mother insect." The book collector did not object to hearing this. He said, "It is indeed very descriptive, and it was discovered by you, so you should name it." Nanling returned to the Juxia with his little pet. He even specially modified a space cargo hold to raise pets. Then he conducted some research on the distribution of insect swarms on this brown Earth planet, and finally judged, the king insect must have left here. But I don't understand, how did it leave? The dark locust definitely seems to have another mystery, but I don't know what this mystery is. At this time, he can only continue to target the insect nest. He spent a lot of energy to destroy the other 10 nests in the same way and captured the queens. There were originally 17 nests on this planet, but now there are only 6 left. At this time, Liji received the news. We just intercepted the alarm message of another planetary system. They were also invaded by the nether locusts and are now asking for help. Nanling was surprised to hear this, and he hurriedly asked, "Where is it?" Liji said, "It is in the Proxima system 30 light-years away from here." Nanling heard this without any hesitation, and said, "Let's go there and take a look." Liji asked, "Are you not going to clean up the nests here?" Nanling said, "One queen can only control 100,000 nether locusts at most." This is the conclusion I came to after cleaning up 11 nests. There are still 6 nests scattered on this planet, and the living space left for humans on this planet is enough. Now the real important thing is to catch the mutated king insect. Liji also understood the importance of hearing this. But here comes the problem. The other people on the ship are all transmitting their consciousness. Will there be any problem in hyperspace flight at this time? Unexpectedly, Nanling thought for a while and said, "Don't worry, the connection of consciousness is not something that hyperspace can interfere with. I have experience in this area." He did have experience. If someone else had the same experience of consciousness transmission as him, his brain would have exploded long ago. So Liji no longer had any doubts. Anyway, if there was a problem, it was Nanling's wife. He was not anxious about her, a companion old aunt. The Juxia flew up from the huge crater and then made a short hyperspace flight. 30 light-years is not far, and conventional hyperspace flight only takes 1 day. Nanling said it was okay, but he still didn't dare to go directly to deep hyperspace navigation. Unfortunately, when they arrived at the place a day later, the Proxima galaxy was left with only a scorched Earth. Similar to the situation of the brown Earth planet, the space station was completely shot down and even eaten up. And because there is no atmosphere on the huge mining planet, there is no life. Scan this planetary system to see if there are any details that have been missed. Nanling gave the order while thinking. He suddenly realized something and connected the communication between the book collector and the seeker of knowledge. I suspect that the nether locust itself has the ability to travel through space. The seeker of knowledge responded first. This is also our guess. After all, if it is not the case, it is really impossible to explain why the nether locust can occupy the entire galaxy. After all, based on our understanding of the nether locust, although they have the ability to travel through interstellar space, their speed is just so-so. If they really want to cross and occupy the galaxy by conventional flight, it will probably take them billions of years. This is obviously impossible. So the only answer is that at least the early nether locusts have the ability to travel through space. The book collector said, "Compared to these, I'm more curious about why the sky jumper asked this question." Nanling said, "Because the king insect I am looking for here is suspected to have this ability. It took me about 7 months from the time I received the news of the activities of the Hades locusts to the time I arrived at the brown Earth planet. However, when I cleared the Hades locusts on this planet, a large swarm of insects had already engulfed the human forces in the Proxima galaxy. All in all, it took 7 months to reach the Proxima galaxy 30 light-years away. Even the speed of light cannot reach it, and there are no superluminal means that we are familiar with." The book collector agreed, "That's right, hyperspace and space jump, there are only 2 possibilities. If it is a space jump, then it is too valuable to us, so it is very important, we must catch it. The seeker of knowledge also became interested, and he said, I will give you a blueprint of a high-power scanner. If you make it, you can conduct large-scale scans, and even scan the trajectory of hyperspace flight. Plus you have digital life assistants over there, you'll definitely not let the mutated king insect escape. Very good, Nanling is going to rub the high-tech equipment with his hands again. Chapter 444. The dark glow costs in hyperspace. Nanling started to rub the high-tech equipment by hand again. It was not the first time anyway. Now he was getting more and more skilled in this craft. Especially after Mo and the others regained consciousness, he worked faster. Xiaonan, I didn't expect that the mental weapons would be like this. Speaking of which, they are not wearing clothes, which makes me feel a little weird. Fanny was chattering there, with a look of excitement on her face. Mo helped Nanling rub the equipment by hand while looking at her reproachfully and said, how can you say anything? Aren't you ashamed? Fanny said confidently, we are all family. What is there to be ashamed of? Besides, Xiaonan is your husband, and he is mine. She ate the last two words, and then changed the subject and said, didn't he react to the mental weapons earlier than us? I'm asking him for advice. Mo didn't believe her, but she didn't say anything. The synchronization rate problem of the mental weapons did bother her. Nanling heard this and said, next time you project your consciousness, remember to use your mental power to spread it throughout your body to warm it up. You must know that consciousness does not only exist in the brain, but also in the internal organs and limbs. He paused here and then said, in fact, it's just like when you refine the burning sunday and the feathered moon, just treat this body as another magic weapon to refine it. Fanny and Mo were greatly inspired by this, and they nodded to show that they knew. Then Fanny said, if there is anything wrong with this mental armor, it's probably just a little too big and thick. Hearing Fanny's complaints, Nanling also laughed. He said, the complete refinement of the mental armor can actually be regarded as another body of ours. In case there is any problem with our original body, we can completely transfer our consciousness to the mental armor and continue to exist. But in that case, we can't be considered human beings. Fanny heard this and quickly crossed her arms and shook her head and said, I don't want it, that's too boring. That's true. If she changed to the mental armor, wouldn't she lose this pair of proud big rice bowls? But think about it, there is no difference between men and women in the mind armor. They are just individuals. Maybe one person can create a civilization, but many people cannot form a civilization. The mind armor may also be a possible future envisioned by the Xincan pioneers, but Nanling doesn't like it very much. But Nanling didn't object to this, because he had seen that the Xincan pioneers did not mean to make a decision for mankind. They just took out all kinds of possibilities and let human civilization choose what it would become. Li Ji said. The superlimit scanner has been debugged almost. Should we start to detect the location of the Hades Locust King? Nanling said. Okay, start the investigation. The next moment, the newly made scanner started to operate at full power, and all the information within the surrounding thousands of light years was included in the detection one by one. This huge amount of information almost exploded the super brain center of the Zhuoxia, but fortunately it barely held up. But even so, the complicated information flow made Li Ji speechless. Li Ji had not expected that this scanner could gather so much information when it was turned on at full power. She was already in a mess just processing this information. As a last resort, Fan Oling and the other two joined in, and together with Redstone, they assisted in processing this information. With the help of the intelligent core, it was equivalent to adding 4 plug-in modules to the super brain center of Zhuoxia to increase the computing power, and the processing efficiency was finally improved. To be honest, most of this information was some messy and invalid information, and this time it was used as a debugging operation. Nanling soon discovered the strength of this superlimit scanner. It can scan the remnants of the aircraft entering hyperspace flight. It can even calculate its flight direction through the remnants. After half a day of intense calculations, everyone finally sorted out the information and conducted another targeted detection. They found a large-scale hyperspace flight remnant in this planetary system. Because a normal human fleet, a full fleet, regardless of the size of the ship, is only 20 to 30 starships in total. The largest and most massive battle in recent times took place in the Wind region, where the Zhuoxia led the White Feather 6th Fleet to annihilate the Fate Silent Fleet consisting of more than 300 starships. But a fleet of that size was not good enough in front of this hyperspace remnant. Because in the scanner, Nanling saw tens of thousands of hyperspace tracks. This densely packed area really made people's scalp tingle. It's the nether locusts, they can fly in hyperspace. But now it seems that they have looted enough materials and are preparing for a long voyage. I don't know where they will go, he muttered while sending the findings to the Seeker, hoping that the big guy could help him analyze it together. The Seeker fell silent after seeing the message sent by Nanlin. He said, in this direction, they should be heading to the outer areas of the Milky Way. Nanling felt embarrassed when he heard this. He said, it has taken so long. I'm worried, the Seeker said, forget it. Let them go. We have more important things to do. At present, the nether locusts only have the ability to fly in hyperspace. There is no need to slow down our wormhole crossing experiment. Nanling nodded. This decision was just what he wanted. After all, he really didn't want to waste his time on these things. He had too many things to do. Then we can only let those nether locusts linger on at the edge of the Milky Way. Maybe they will participate in the disputes in the Milky Way in the future, but Nanling is not too worried about it. He is not an invincible saint who has to take care of everything himself. There are so many people in the Milky Way and so many top forces. There are plenty of people to deal with these things. Nanling even suspected that when humans return to war mode, they can even suppress the intelligent machines and the nether locusts while fighting the civil war. As long as they can wake up in time and complete the transformation. He suddenly laughed, thinking that this might be what the big guys expected to see. The tracking operation was stopped, and Nanling didn't know what to do for a while. After all, Fanny, Mo and Thongshi all had to transmit their consciousness to the Seekers to train in the use of mental weapons, and the further experiments at the caster had not been completed. What should Nanling do now? When he was free, he couldn't help but think of those people on Brown Earth Star. After all, he felt that he should do something for them. Sister Liji, help me prepare some carbon silicon raw materials from the fusion reactor. I want to make something. Liji was quite surprised, but since Nanling needed her, she did it. As for Nanlin, he used these carbon silicon raw materials to make hard and translucent crystal plates. The surface of the crystal plate was smooth, but the translucent interior was filled with dense text and graphics. Nanling actually recorded a secret method of cultivation in it. And this is not an ordinary secret method of spiritual power cultivation, but a secret method of spiritual core power cultivation created by Nanling according to his own understanding. Is he going to open the editor again and edit his own skills? Chapter 445 Beauty is Justice. Nanling created a technique to adapt to the power of the spirit core with the four attributes he was familiar with: wind, fire, thunder, and water. These techniques were recorded in the crystal plate and then distributed to the entire Brown Earth Star as a basis for the survival of the people on this planet. Compared with the ethereal and changeable spiritual power, the power of the spirit core is easier to sense and practice. Of course, the price is that only a single polarity of a single attribute can be practiced. But this is better. Nanlin thinks that this will make the people on the planet understand that only by cooperating with each other can they survive better. He made dozens of techniques with different polarities, copied tens of thousands of copies, and then distributed them to the planet happily. He did what he could, and the rest of the people on this planet could only rely on themselves. After doing all this, he let the Shuoxia fly back to the ancient domain. This was Gu Chen's request, mainly to let Fanny, as a sister, see her newborn and unborn brother. It's really incredible. Old Gu, who has only had one daughter for so many years, can't stop and start giving birth to sons. Nanling did not fly in deep hyperspace mode, after all, that would have an unknown impact on the people who were adapting to the Propos armor. So he just sailed at normal hyperspace speed, and digested what he had gained during this period of time. During this period of time, he really had a huge harvest, especially when he shuttled through the wormhole, which made him seem to see a different realm. At this time, while flying in hyperspace, Nanling had been carefully experiencing and thinking about that realm. So boring. Liji's lazy voice came from the side. Nanling opened his eyes and said, "Why don't you play a game by yourself?" Liji said, "What's there to see? I'm cheating if I play games." Then she blinked the eyes of the crystal prosthesis and said, "No, how can you talk to me in hyperspace?" In the past, even if Nanling could stay awake, he could only barely raise his arms at most. How could he talk to her like nothing happened now? Nanling was stunned for a moment, and then suddenly realized something and said, "Wait, I think I understand." He tried to sit up, and he succeeded. Then he stood up and took 2 steps, and there was no problem. His mind was released to contact the hyperspace information around him, and he found that the originally extremely chaotic information was completely understandable, or in other words, some phenomena that he could understand. At least in the shallow hyperspace, he could move freely and normally. He said, "It seems that my soul has become much stronger during this period, and my understanding of space has been greatly enhanced. Strictly speaking, this hyperspace is actually the surface of the distorted space behind the wormhole." Nanling's mind was full of various serious conjectures, but his companion old aunt didn't think so. She came over and said meanly, "Shao Nan, I'll tell you something secretly. Mo and Fanny actually left the door open for you. You can go over and sleep with them secretly now, and no one will even realize what happened." Nanling looked at the old aunt who encouraged him to make a mistake with a bad temper, and suddenly felt that it was better to be angry. Li Ji was extremely sensitive to this, and then said, "I feel that you're thinking about others." Nanling was stunned. "This can be seen." Li Ji said, "When I was standing on the street to pick up customers, some customers were clearly trying hard on me but thinking about other bitches in their hearts. You had the same expression on your face." Nanling didn't know how to describe his mood at this moment. He could only mourn for Jiao who became a bitch for no reason. He said, "You think too much." "I was thinking about whether I should go and see them." Li Ji said, "Then go. Anyway, I can be alone here." She looked quite bored. Nanling said, "Don't worry, I will be back soon, and I still have to think about some things here." After saying that, he lay back down, installed a consciousness transmission device on himself, and then projected his consciousness out. He also had the coordinates of Mo's side. It was an organization affiliated with the Seekers of Knowledge. In fact, it was near the Star Federation, not too far away. The appearance of Nanling's consciousness projection immediately attracted the attention of many people in this organization. Fox, the follower of the Seeker of Knowledge, was in charge of the overall situation. He was stunned when he saw Nanling appear, and then he said in a very humble tone, "Greetings, Lord Skyjumper." At this moment, he felt that the world was amazing. The boy who was just standing behind Miss Fanny of the Gi family back then was now a great man who was on equal footing with Lord Seeker of Knowledge. Nanling's consciousness projection smiled and said, "No need to salute. I don't have so many rules." Fox said, "No, I have heard about the greatness of Skyjumper from Lord Seeker of Knowledge. You are the pioneer of the entire human race, shining like the stars. Well, this is flattery. Tell me quickly, what did he do to become the Skyjumper?" The tone was sour, and the tone was a big like Fanny, but the voice was a big muffled. Nanling looked in the direction of the voice and saw a slender and slightly bulging psychic armor standing there. He laughed dumbly and said, "Fanny. Who else could it be?" The psychic armor replied unhappily. Then Nanling saw another psychic armor who was a little stronger but with a slightly bulging chest coming over. She didn't say anything, but her demeanor and behavior made Nanling feel very familiar. He said, "Sister Mo, this is you." Mo nodded and said, "It's me, but it's a little ugly now. I don't want you to see it." Fox's face was broken, and he felt that he had had enough. Nanling said with a smile, "I thought psychic armor should be gender neutral. Looking at your body shape, it must have been very difficult for Mr. Fox to modify it." Fox didn't dare to show any expression of hardship, and could only say with a smile, "It's all right, it's all right." He heard that Nanling's experiment was very smooth, and thought it was an easy job. Unexpectedly, Nanlin, who was born in a grassroots family, was completely different from the young ladies. Nanling paid more attention to practicality, but the young ladies obviously valued beauty more. No matter how practical it is, as long as it is not beautiful enough, it is not practical. You want to be their second body in this state. How can this be? If you don't change it to be beautiful, don't expect us to cooperate well. That's how it is. So it's the Redstone Psychic Armor that has the highest synchronization rate. Chapter 446 Water Escape Shuttle. Nanling looked at the spiritual weapons of the Seekers and found that these spiritual weapons were not better than Nanling's in terms of overall strength. They were just polarized according to different people, which made them more distinctive. In other words, Nanling's spiritual weapons were universal versions, while the spiritual weapons obtained by Fanny, Mo, and Thongshi were customized versions. But customized versions are not necessarily better than universal versions. After all, Nanling can use the universal version to exert spiritual core power of many different attributes, while they can only use spiritual core power that matches their own attributes. Of course, normal people can't master 4 attributes at the same time like Nanling. The arrival of Nanling's consciousness projection obviously made the trio here much more excited. At least Fanny and Mo practiced harder. Nanling will also share some of his experience with them so that they can master their new bodies faster. Nanling has already foreseen one thing, that is, sooner or later their team will be sent to do something extraordinary. He also knew the details of this matter. After all, the relic fragment at the birth point in the Galaxy Fairy, the Dark Locust disaster, was enough to explain the problem. It would be a big battle. Nanling accompanied his wife and boss for a while, and then went to Fox to ask about the current situation of the Seeker. Fox said, "If you want to ask, I will tell you everything I know. The Seeker is currently studying the impact of the power of spirit cores with different attributes on space travel. At present, we're responsible for providing resources, and another organization is building another mass energy space station on the Star Federation side. No, the mass energy space station now has a new name, called Space Relay Station." Nanling said happily after hearing this. "It's a good name, and it's vivid enough. Are you planning to try to let you and the Star Federation conduct space connection experiments first?" Fox said, "That's what I mean, but all this still depends on the Skycrosser to improve the experimental data. After all, you are the only one who is confident of completing space travel now." Nanling nodded. He was actually full of expectations for this matter. "How is the progress of the project?" Fox said, "It's already under construction. It's expected to take 2 months. It may take some time to debug." Nanling nodded and said nothing more. He was also aroused now. He said hello to his wife and boss, 2 old-fashioned girls, and his consciousness stepped into the void. What is he going to do? But after he completed that space travel, his understanding of space has grown by leaps and bounds. At the same time, he always guessed that consciousness projection is actually completing space travel without knowing it. Then can he accomplish this with his own power? Of course, he can't just walk around randomly. There must always be a target. His body. Needless to say, his body is in hyperspace flight, and his mental armor is in the survivor base on the edge of the wisdom domain. His consciousness disappeared and reappeared in an instant, and the next moment he came to his mental armor. Interesting, but it's a pity that I didn't feel the process of space travel. It seemed like I just came here all of a sudden." He then said thoughtfully, "Perhaps, this is the principle of quantum resonance." A person muttered to himself, and when he sat up, he heard Jiabu's voice next to him. "Sir, you're back, but do you have any instructions?" Nanling stopped thinking, and then said, "Let's see how you are prepared first. Is there any other polarity module equipped on the 100 Ice Shuttle?" Jiabu said, "Don't worry, sir, the adjustments in this part have been completed. In addition to the original Shenfen polarity module, the 100 Ice Shuttle is also equipped with the Tianhua polarity module of the water system, and there is also that Vulcan furnace polarity module of the fire system and the Jinghong polarity module of the thunder system as backup." Nanling nodded repeatedly after listening, and he said, "Then can I try the effect of the water-based escape technique now?" Jiabu said, "But the Space Relay Station has not completed the final debugging. Should we wait a little longer?" Nanling waved his hand and said, "It doesn't matter. For me, the Space Relay Station is only used for positioning." As soon as he finished speaking, he appeared in front of the 100 Ice Shuttle. Sure enough, this 100 Ice Shuttle was ready to go at any time. Nanling jumped into the square groove on the belly of the 100 Ice Shuttle without saying a word, and then turned his body and entered the cockpit. As the cockpit lit up, the surrounding scenes were all in sight, and Jiabu's voice still rang in his ears. "Okay, since you insist, I will follow you again." Nanling smiled silently, and then said, "Get ready, the water escape is about to start." The next moment, all the water attribute spirit core power gathered in the Tianhua polarity module was drawn out, and the entire 100 Ice Shuttle suddenly turned into a big water drop. It was as if there was a tip sound, and it fell on a certain water surface. And the next moment, a line of water shuttled out of the hangar of the 100 Ice Shuttle and poured into the wormhole that had expanded a lot. The trickle of water quickly passed through the space channel. In this case, all the reconnaissance capabilities of the 100 Ice Shuttle were invalid, and it all depended on Nanling's perception to distinguish. It seemed like a long time had passed, but it also seemed like only a moment. In a certain empty void, a thin stream of water suddenly appeared, and then the 100 Ice Shuttle rushed out of the stream. "Resume reconnaissance and positioning, and send a message to the survivors' base," Nanling ordered, while recording all his insights. Unfortunately, the system capacity of the 100 Ice Shuttle seemed to be a little insufficient, and it would be full in a short while. Nanling sighed helplessly. He could only refine his many insights and only give some summary data. These data are enough for the casters to study space travel, but they cannot help them study space. Nanling actually wanted to share this knowledge with others and discuss it, but it seems a little inconvenient now. He gradually found that technology was less and less helpful to him, and there were fewer and fewer people who could discuss with him. He suddenly missed his mother and Yu Chen. Both of them were unique cultivators, and perhaps they could understand this knowledge better. A moment later, he received a message from the caster. Skycrosser, your shuttle experiment has also been successful. Congratulations, you have truly mastered the power of space travel. Please return now to share your experience of this shuttle. Nanling nodded. This was indeed a successful shuttle, even more successful than the previous Wind Escape shuttle. After all, the location where he appeared this time was the same location when he first used the worm detector to shuttle. At least to a certain extent, it shows that crossing a wormhole can have a fixed landing point. Chapter 447. Space Perception. Nanling's first space travel proved that humans can indeed cross the distance of space through wormholes. His second space travel proved that wormhole crossing can have a directional goal, and he has more than one power that can cross the wormhole. Water escape is possible, and the next step is to prove that lightning escape and fire escape can also be used. Nanling did not waste any time and completed 2 round trips with fire escape and lightning escape. This fully proves that his name Skycrosser is correct. At the same time, the data he brought back from these 4 shuttles is also extremely precious, proving that at least 4 polar forces can cross space. As for the other polar forces, sorry, because Nanling can't do it, they have no way to self-prove for the time being. This makes people very entangled. Almost all the experimental data of wormhole crossing depends on Nanling, and even all progress must be promoted based on Nanling's successful experience. The caster is more and more like a craftsman under Nanling. Although he has superb skills, he has no creativity of his own, so he can only work according to other people's ideas. The experiment of crossing space with different attributes came to a temporary end, because without Nanling's assistance, the efficiency of such an experiment was really low. Nanling's next step was to cross in different directions through a wormhole. Of course, this was not a random move. The caster once again provided cutting-edge technology. He used the already small space on the 100i shuttle to add another beacon cabin that was only about the size of a matchbox. This beacon cabin was filled with nano-level beacons, and in this matchbox space, there were 10 million nano-beacons densely arranged. With these beacons, every time Nanling's crossing experiment was carried out, it would leave a clear track in the space tunnel. And these beacons left in the space tunnel were equivalent to leaving Nanling with a trail of signs, allowing him to record every time he went through the space. But to be honest, this way of exploration was too tiring and too slow to be effective. It was undoubtedly a stupid way. There was no way. He was in a hurry to get on the road, but once he stopped and carefully distinguished, he would find countless passages, and even more passages after turning a passage. Nanling gradually felt that this mechanical work was becoming boring. Fortunately, in such attempts, Nanling still discovered the different effects of different spiritual powers on space. He used the power of the wind spirit core or the wind escape technique most easily, and in fact, it was also the most convenient one for him personally. The characteristic of seeking through any gap allowed Nanling to travel freely in the tunnel network of the wormhole space with the wind escape technique, with almost no obstacles. Then came the water escape technique. The flow characteristics of water were almost seeking through any gap, but it was not as strong as wind, so he could not get into some very small gaps. But there was one good thing about the water escape technique, which was that it could expand the space channel to a limited extent, so that it would be smoother the next time you take the same route. The fire escape technique was more likely to have problems, because it seemed to be particularly easy to stimulate the void, which could cause the void tunnel to expand briefly, but then it would also cause a contraction. It was just like Fanny's temperament, unpredictable. The lightning escape technique is the fastest and the most difficult to control. It is best to keep moving forward along the established route. Once something unexpected happens, it is very likely that you will completely lose your way. Because the lightning escape technique has the strongest destructive power, it is even possible to directly penetrate the space barrier and come to a completely different route. There is no doubt that any escape technique is extremely valuable for Nanling to study. He even feels that he can use these escape techniques to interpret and understand the mysteries of space from different angles. Just when he was thinking about whether to completely get rid of the experimental process of the forger and go it alone, the seeker of knowledge finally sent good news. That is, his space relay station is also ready. The next experiment is to try whether the space shuttle between the two space relay stations can be completed smoothly. The 100i shuttle started again. This can be said to be the most advanced reconnaissance ship in the galaxy and has made outstanding contributions. At this time, the 100i shuttle has also undergone many optimizations. In the case of a slight increase in size, 3 polarity module slots have been added. In other words, Nanling can now use the 100i shuttle to exert 5 polarity powers at the same time. Putting aside the 4 powers he mastered, namely wind, fire, thunder and water, the Forger stubbornly added a 5th one to him. Rob Kingpillar. It was said that it was to increase his defense ability, so let's just say it was acceptable. In this case, Nanling set sail again in the 100i shuttle and entered the wormhole widened by the space relay station here. However, he did not rush forward, but stayed at the entrance to conduct reconnaissance and perception. After all, this is a place more than 20,000 light-years away, and it is definitely not an easy task to shuttle through it. What's more, is it so easy for the light of another space relay station to shine here? Nanling was trying to find the energy reaction emitted by another space relay station at this time. Then, he seemed to succeed. When he clearly observed the wormhole mouth emitting faint light with the 100 eyes system, he found that the space tunnel area of this wormhole was smaller than he imagined. At this moment, something in his mind was touched and erupted. Endless inspiration burst out in his mind. An extremely large space model even appeared in his consciousness. The Milky Way is laid flat on the outermost plane, and the layers of space that are twisted by gravity are like layers of paper rolls, stacked onto the Milky Way's plane. Therefore, hyperspace flight can easily break the speed of light, because the spacecraft in the hyperspace is running at a high spatial curvature. So what about the closed wormhole space system? There is no doubt that it is the innermost layer of this 1000-layer roll. As the space model in Nanling's mind took shape, it seemed no difficulty to look at the space inside the wormhole. It started quietly, and then naturally found a path to the other end, and reached the other end at the fastest speed. Only 7 minutes, this is incredible. On the other side, the Seeker and the Caster have already descended here with their consciousness projections. They feel extremely incredible about Nanling's success. Nanling said with a kind of enlightenment-like tranquility, "I have figured out a space model, which may be helpful to you." After the voice fell, he generously shared what he had just gained. It's not that he doesn't know how to keep things to himself, it's just that he knows the abilities of these Xincan pioneers too well. This kind of thing can only be pushed to bear fruit as quickly as possible if there is a direction for it. Nanling doesn't care whether he can monopolize this kind of knowledge. Anyway, for now, it's just what he can do. He just wants to develop a result as soon as possible to break the shackles of the galactic human beings. Chapter 448 Technology Exchange. The Caster and Seeker of Knowledge were greatly shocked by Nanling's sharing. After all, for their level, only knowledge is truly valuable. And even they would not share their most profound and proud knowledge completely. In their eyes, that is the foundation of their existence. This is normal, even the most selfless people will have their own selfish desires. In comparison, the Xincan pioneers have done enough for the human race. As for Nanling's generosity at this time, he felt that he was not at the point where he was held back by these spatial knowledge. He felt that he still had many things to explore, so he could share so frankly. But it is undeniable that when Nanling shared this information, he became the most precious guest of the Seeker of Knowledge and the Caster. The Seeker of Knowledge hesitated for a moment, and asked, "We will keep this spatial model confidential for you." Nanling shook his head and said, "There is no need to keep it confidential. Xincan pioneers can have it. After all, if you want to explore, you must first go far, right? And when you go far, you will always think about coming back to take a look, right?" His answer was very surprising, but his broad mind and demeanor were convincing. Perhaps the two Xincan pioneers also understand the truth that free is the most expensive, but there is no way they can't be indifferent to this knowledge. So the two Xincan pioneers' technology library is completely open to Nanling. They can't share their own survival technology, but other technologies are completely open to Nanling. Nanling's space model seems simple, but in fact it has countless understandings of space, so it is almost immediately filled with the superbrain space used by Seekers and Casters. And they also seem to want to use various technologies to completely occupy the system space of Nanling's Zhuoxia. It's really an alternative competition. But there is no doubt that for Nanling, the perfection of this mature cutting-edge technology is definitely a huge gain. Maybe in the eyes of the two, they are a slightly cheaper equivalent exchange, but in Nanling's eyes, he has made a lot of money. He just glanced at the two technology lists and felt that he could completely achieve two different civilizations with this, and they are the kind of cutting-edge civilization that surpasses contemporary human civilization. Over the years, the Great Ones have been suppressing the continued development of human civilization and waiting for the perfection of the path of cultivation, but they themselves have never stopped and are still moving forward on different paths. Nanling was not in a hurry to return to the survivor base with a lot of harvest. He decided to meet with the few people who were training here in the form of mental armament. When Nanling's mental armament appeared in front of Fanny and Mo, they were stunned for a moment, and then immediately showed joy. This was definitely a huge surprise for them. Of course, the researchers who were monitoring their synchronization rate couldn't help but exclaimed, "Impossible, the synchronization rate actually jumped at the same time, how did they do it?" Obviously, because they felt that this mental armament was not beautiful enough before, they resisted it from the bottom of their hearts. Now they saw Nanling's same look, and even because Nanling's mental armament was old and looked ordinary, they immediately felt that their star spirit armament was still pretty good. Nanling originally wanted to instruct them as a veteran on how to control the mental armament to improve the synchronization rate, but he didn't expect that this goal would be easily achieved in this way. Nanling was helpless and amused about this, and could only play with them for a while. Then he returned to the survivors' base in Yu through the wormhole. Next is the busy time for the casters. They need to conduct deeper research through the space model provided by Nanling, and finally find a more popular application method. There is nothing for him to do for the time being, so Nanling suddenly thought of asking his mother and Fanny's father to learn some space technology. Anyway, he is idle now, and the two of them probably have nothing to do, so he will find something for them to do. Nanling will first find his mother. Mrs. Rose just lost her husband, and now she has left her son behind, and is embarking on a new journey with ease. Nanling touched up without knowing that fun, and his consciousness was projected over, and even projected onto the ship when the other party was sailing in the deep hyperspace. Mrs. Rose was naturally startled. She was awake in the deep hyperspace, but it was so scary that someone suddenly floated in front of her. "You little brat, why are you running to me for no reason?" Madame Rose was furious. She was glad that she didn't do anything embarrassing. Nanling said, "Mom, I just happened to get some good stuff and wanted to share it with you. But there is too much information and your ship's system may not be able to handle it." Madame Rose glanced at Nanling, and then gave him a helpless and doting roll of the eyes, and could only operate the spacecraft to stop sailing. While operating, she said, "I thought I could use the 20 years of sailing time to calm down and think about my problems, but it seems that you obviously don't want me to stay alone quietly." Although she complained, she was actually quite happy. After all, although children are noisy and annoying, parents still like to see their little ones always thinking about themselves. However, when Madame Rose saw the space information brought by Nanling, there was only a big speechless on her face. She wanted a good and quiet journey to help her get through the pain of losing her husband. But her unlucky child actually sent her information on space travel, and almost taught her how to travel to the space relay station in Yu in one step. Is it the time she lacks for the journey? What she lacks is peace of mind. This unfortunate child. Madame Rose was furious, but she couldn't do anything to Nanling. After all, Nanling was just a projection of consciousness, and the projection of consciousness in the deep hyperspace consumes a lot of energy. However, after Madame Rose read the information stored on her spaceship again, she suddenly smiled and said, "So that's how it is. Although there is no way to travel through the physical body, you can try to use the nascent soul." As soon as the voice fell, her nascent soul left her body. To be honest, she didn't care too much about this nascent soul. After all, in her feeling, this nascent soul was like a gift left by herself in the previous life. She was thinking about taking time to practice one according to Nanling's theory. So she was very bold in using this nascent soul. She used it as soon as she said it. This was also just a differentiation of her consciousness in the nascent soul. Otherwise, she would be courting death by doing so. The same thing happened to Gyu Chen, but Gyu Chen's approach was completely different. He was thinking about building a space repeater here. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 449. Spaceship Escape. Madame Rose and Gyu Chen both took action. Although they worked in different directions, they were undoubtedly both important explorations of space technology. Chen would also build a space relay station in the Qingshuan galaxy, which could be said to be the third relay station in the entire Milky Way. At this time, perhaps he was just investing his own resources to participate in such high-end experiments, but when the wormhole crossing function gradually became civilian, the benefits that this space relay station could bring would be incomparable. In the following time, Nanling would often project his consciousness to Chen and help him build a space relay station. With the help of this sky crosser, the space relay station was of course progressing rapidly. On the other hand, the small circle of Xingcan pioneers also stirred up some waves again, that is, the immortal returned. Nanling was quite surprised when he heard this from the seeker of knowledge. His mother was in touch with these Xingcan pioneers again. He inquired a little and found out what an exaggerated thing his courageous mother had done. She used her own nascent soul to complete the space shuttle, and appeared in front of the caster and the beauty seeker. They were stunned for a moment. At the same time, it verified one thing, that is, the way of cultivation is indeed an important way out for the future of mankind. Because they and Nanling had spent a lot of effort to complete the space travel through various experiments and protective measures, Mrs. Rose's nascent soul completed it easily. Even when asked about the difficulties she encountered in the process, she was still quite confused. For this reason, Nanling was very excited. He did not feel that he had wasted so much time on things that could be naturally accomplished. On the contrary, he was surprised that he had found a little direction for the development of the nascent soul stage. At least the nascent soul stage is no longer a dark one for him. She is worthy at being her biological mother. Thank her for leading the way. Nanling prayed devoutly, and then went to Chen to continue thinking about the space relay station. During this process, Baishan, who was pregnant with Chen's third child, would often come to visit. She would also bring the baby named Fancy to greet Nanling. Nanling still had a good impression of this aunt who had raised Fanny and Mo. He saw that Baishan's cultivation level was only at the 6th level of the Golden Core, because she had been pregnant with 2 children for Chen in a row, which greatly delayed her own cultivation. He simply explained the method of cultivation to Baishan whenever he had time, and also helped her try to adjust the internal composition of her Golden Core. Although it is said that when you are pregnant, your body needs a lot of nutrients to supply the child, but don't forget that in this era, what can't rich people solve? Drinking nutrient solution as water, Baishan's cultivation is also maintained as much as possible while ensuring that the child is well nourished. In this regard, Chen and Baishan's good impression of Nanling can be said to be directly full. Originally, Chen was quite optimistic about Nanling. Although there was something unclear between him and his daughter, he didn't want to care too much when the child grew up. And Nanling has also brought him a lot of help over the years, and now he is even more concerned about his wife's health and cultivation. This is really impossible to ask for more. The old father said earnestly. Fanny must have caused you a lot of trouble, right? Nanling said modestly. Fanny is my boss, so it's my duty to deal with her troubles. Chen was a little surprised and asked, is this your relationship? Nanling nodded seriously and sincerely. He was really confident in this aspect. He had never touched his wife, so how could he have a relationship with his boss? Who knew that Chen was inexplicably happy after hearing this, and then said, you young people have a lot of ideas. Then he turned to Baishan and said, wife, how about I call you boss from now on? Baishan was completely confused, and then she said shyly, this kind of address can be said behind closed doors at home, why did you say it in front of Xiaonan? Nanling was shocked on the spot. He felt that Fanny's temper made sense. It was a typical case of the upper beam being crooked and the lower beam being crooked. How come the word boss, which was originally pure and innocent, seems to be wrong after being used by Chen? Seeing this, Chen laughed and said, I was just teasing you, you are so easy to tease. Can you calculate the day you were coming back accurately? When Fancy was born, Fan and I, the elder sister, didn't come back. Now that little Fanny is born, she should be able to make it in time, right? Nanling nodded and said, it's completely in time. If Uncle can complete the space relay station earlier, we can try to shuttle through the wormhole. Chen was so scared that his face turned pale on the spot. He wanted to grab Nanling but touched nothing. After all, Nanling was just a consciousness at this time. He said helplessly, can you not be so hasty? Even those Xingcan pioneers have not yet experimented with perfect data in this regard, right? Nanling shook his head and said with a smile, don't worry, uncle, with my understanding of space, I am sure I can do it. Besides, this is supposed to be tried by someone. If I don't try, I don't know how long it will take for them to complete the key experiment. He smiled. After all, he is a serious sky jumper, a member of the Xincan Pioneers. Of course, his name has not yet been sung. If Gichen knew that he was a Xincan pioneer, perhaps he would not be so nervous. Nanling tried his best to persuade him, and even took out a lot of space information that could blow up Gichen's system to prove himself. After changing the system host 3 times, Gichen finally chose to compromise. He said, "Okay, I believe you, isn't it enough? Don't blow up my system again." Nanling was melancholy. He found that the insights in his mind seemed to be unable to be carried by this secular container. He said, "Don't worry, Uncle Gu. In fact, someone has successfully completed wormhole travel with the Yuning before. This can fully verify my theory. I just need to make some modifications to the Juoxia so that it can carry the escape technique." Gichen was moved and said, "Escape technique? Can your escape technique control such a large spaceship?" Nanling lowered his head and thought for a while, then said, "To be honest, I am quite confident. I have tried wind escape, water escape, fire escape and lightning escape. Among them, wind escape is actually the worst at enveloping objects. If I can only cross the void with my physical body, then I will definitely try wind escape first. Water escape has the highest stability and is the most moderate. I think it is also a direction to try. It's a pity that I have done the least research on water techniques, so I didn't choose it. I learned fire escape from Fana. It is quite violent and not suitable. But lightning escape," Nanling paused. He said confidently, "I thought lightning escape was the most difficult to control, but in fact I found that human spaceships are full of electrical equipment. In fact, lightning escape is the most suitable escape technique for human creations." Chapter 450. Thunder Escape Spaceship. Nanling's idea was very bold, but it was definitely one of the milestones of the wormhole crossing project. However, he did not deal with the matter by himself, but went to talk to his wife and boss. Fana did not have much opinion on this, but felt disappointed that she might not be able to help. But Mo expressed great interest in this. She simply ignored the adaptation work of the mental armament and turned to study this idea seriously with Nanling. The entire spacecraft was transformed into the lightning escape. What a large-scale operation. Fortunately, the technology of spiritual power connection and large-scale spiritual power blessing can be found in the technology provided by the Forger and the Seeker. They simply parked the Juoxia on a lonely dwarf planet, and then extracted resources for a major transformation of the spacecraft. They thought it would take some time for them to master these technologies. After all, the technology combining spiritual power and machinery in this era is always the most advanced. But to their surprise, they basically knew these technologies at a glance. Although there are many things to learn in terms of creativity and details, for the people on the Juoxia who have grown up too much, these things have not deviated from the theoretical knowledge framework they have mastered. In fact, when it comes to theoretical knowledge, Nanling can do better. Nanling sighed and said, "Our upper limit is stuck, so we have to seek a breakthrough." They stopped talking nonsense, picked and chose, and tried their best to find that technology they could use. Although thanks to someone, we have a lot of precious spiritual material stored on our ship, but there are still some things missing, and we can't make real good things. Li Ji said with some regret. Fana said nonchalantly, "It's okay, let's make a temporary one now, and when we return to the Qingshuan galaxy, we will ask my father to buy enough spiritual materials." The filial daughter took action again. She didn't feel sorry for her own father's money at all. Nanling quickly persuaded him and said, "Don't be like this. It's not easy for Uncle Gyu either. In fact, he doesn't have too much money on hand now." Fanny asked in surprise, "Why is that?" Nanling said, "Because he is already a nascent soul cultivator. According to the rules of Yogi family, nascent soul cultivators can no longer occupy too many resources of the family, and they must give back to the family." Fanny asked in surprise, "How come you become poorer after your cultivation level has increased?" Nanling said, "This may be the reason why your Gyu family has been able to pass down to this day. The Gyu family does not simply concentrate resources in the hands of the strongest. Family members can get the family's full support in the process of becoming stronger and growing, but after reaching a certain stage, they must give back to the family. Only in this way can the family continue, and those who take risks for the family will be willing to do so." Fanny was at a loss. "This is the first time I've heard of this. How did you know?" Nanling said, "I've talked a lot with Uncle Gyu recently, and I also had a good chat with Aunt Baishan. By the way, Aunt Baishan and I hit it off right away, and she even wants little Fancy and the unborn Fanyu to recognize me as their swarm brother." Fan and I stared at Nanling blankly, a little silly, and asked foolishly, "Have you agreed?" She suddenly became nervous and said, "You must not agree. If you agree, won't you become my brother?" Mo couldn't stand it anymore. She interrupted and said, "He is still a brother to my father, and I have never seen him call him uncle." Nanling's eyes lit up when he heard this, and he thought this was possible. Mo choked immediately, clenched his fists and wanted to hit someone. Nanling received his wife's dissatisfaction. He immediately coughed and said, "Boss, don't forget that I am the heir recognized by the ancient immortal monarch, which means..." Fan and I's eyes widened instantly. She looked at Nanling as if to say, "You are not serious, are you?" Mo smiled, very sweetly, and said, "Shan'an means that he is your ancestor." Fanny was absent-minded for a moment, and then said to Nanling unhappily, "I call you Grandpa, do you dare to agree?" Nanling smiled and said, "Of course I dare not." Fanny asked, "Then tell me, what should we do if our spaceship is not modified in place?" Nanling said, "In fact, even if it is not that good, I am sure that everyone can enter the wormhole to shuttle. Then we can go to the Seekers. There must be enough good things there for us to complete the imagined transformation. Besides, if we use the best right away, what if there are still some areas that need improvement? Isn't it a waste?" He made sense, so the others naturally wouldn't refute. They talked and laughed, but the work in their hands was not slow at all. Unknowingly, they had already carried out a comprehensive transformation of the Zhuoxia. Next, it was the verification stage. Of course, they couldn't just take this spaceship and crash it into the wormhole. That would be too desperate. The first thing they had to do was to try to use lightning to carry the Zhuoxia. If the first step couldn't be done, then the subsequent steps would be unnecessary. After the transformation, the Zhuoxia was anchored in the void, and Mo stood on the captain's seat on the bridge and began to exert her electromagnetic control ability. She used her divine thoughts to encompass the entire ship, and then her spiritual power surged around her body, trying to drive the newly built super spiritual furnace on the ship to operate. The next moment, electric current surged on the Zhuoxia, and even those devices that were originally closed automatically turned on, all entering a state of electrical overload. But soon this current became unstable, and Mo said with some difficulty, "No, it's going to get out of control. I can't do it alone." Seeing this, Nanling did not say anything, and immediately released his spiritual power and connected it to Mo's spiritual power. To be honest, they had never performed this operation before, but perhaps because Nanling had been quietly observing Mo's magnetic field characteristics, this time his electromagnetic field perfectly integrated into Mo's electromagnetic field. Then he did not do anything extra, but calmly gathered and converged the electromagnetic waves generated by the out-of-control electrical equipment on the entire ship, and after a quick comb-in, merged them back into Mo's control. This was a perfect cooperation. It was as if they wanted to lift a heavy object. Mo pulled it up hard, and Nanling silently supported it from below. The couple worked together and actually managed to do this. In a wave of electric waves, the Zhuoxia suddenly merged into a thunderbolt, and then turned into a lightning and disappeared on the spot. When it reappeared, it had already flown at a speed extremely close to the speed of light for 3 seconds. "We succeeded." Mo panted and looked at Nanling with a brilliant look in his eyes. Their experiment just now was successful, and the Zhuoxia became the first starship to complete the escape, and it was also their closest flight to the speed of light at present. The scattered electric lights around were still crackling, and Mo's eyes were flashing with indissoluble love. For her, the complete integration with the magnetic field released by Nanling at that moment just now brought her a huge and wonderful impact. This was a pure contact between the heart and the soul, and she couldn't think of anything more wonderful than this. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.